This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hello, one and all, to the 9th episode of ThROH The Years, the podcast where two repressed bakers go through Ring of Honor history show by show from the beginning. I'm Trevor Dame, just really trying hard not to think about cornbread, and as always, by my side is Matt Feuerstein. Matt, how you doing?
I actually haven't been that repressed at all lately. This past weekend I went to two different gatherings. I made brownies for one and chocolate chip cookies for another. Just regular brownies and chocolate chip cookies, so you gotta let your inner baker out.
That sounds so good, actually. It's been so hot here, I almost couldn't bake even if I wasn't really repressing my darkest, innermost yeast-based desires, but...
So you're telling me that brownies and cookies sound good to you?
I know
you're expressing a very controversial opinion.
This is going to be literally the hottest take, like 350-degree oven hottest take. But yes, I find both of those things appealing. Oh. But one other thing I do find appealing is the Place to Be Nation Pro Wrestling Only podcast network. And so many good podcasts there, so many things to listen to. But as always, I like to point out a specific podcast and a specific episode. And this time, I am going to plug Kelly and Marty's tag teams, don't forget the plural, back again, tag teams back again, which is a podcast that's, since I thought last episode I plugged a podcast that was very current, I kind of want to go into the back catalog to a podcast that isn't putting out episodes currently, but has an extensive back catalog on the website. And this is a podcast, as the title might indicate, just about tag teams. And I am going to plug episode 16, which is Kelly and Marty's top 25 tag teams of all time, because I think that's probably a great place to start with a podcast, is to learn what the hosts like. And also, lists about wrestling on a podcast. Matt, could you imagine a podcast where every episode was a list of things? That sounds incredible. I just wish someone would have tried that.
At least somebody who knew what he was doing, you know? Yeah,
like someone who I co-host a podcast with.
Aw.
But that'll never happen.
You deserve a cookie.
I'm a sugar suck-up, not a water wall anymore. Sugar suck-up.
Hashtag.
But you're not actually getting a tiny bit of traction last time.
Yeah, 3 people.
That's 3 more than I expected.
The tiniest bit of traction. You can still hashtag your water wallies and sugar suck-ups to us, so we're always happy to see them. I still search Water Wally on Twitter every day just in case.
And it's still Water Wally season. You have probably a good month at least. And with global warming, maybe all year. Am I right, folks? Am I right?
With global warming, we're going to be water wanties.
All the future wars, hashtag Water Wallace. But
now you
that's when it gets more serious. That's when it gets more serious. That's only when the end times come, when all future wars are fought over water and minerals. Oh, okay. Then you can do Water Wallace. Gotcha. Until then, we keep it light. But now, before we get into the show, the Ring of Honor event proper, I do actually have a couple of notes that happened in this time about Ring of Honor. And the first, from The Observer, is the continuing saga of their local television show in Channel 48 in Philadelphia. Dave writes, Ring of Honor is strongly considering dumping its television in Philadelphia. The TV exposure was an experiment largely to push sales of videos, and it hasn't worked, nor has it brought a new audience to the house shows. The feeling is with midnight television of 5 different promotions each week on Channel 48 in Philadelphia, many of which use similar talent in different storylines. For example, guys team on one show and feud on another, guys are faces on one show, heels on another, etc. That just muddles the marketplace. Now, I really only brought this up, one, because I find it funny through all these months. ROH constantly goes back and forth for a period of months where it seems like every month in The Observer, ROH says, well, maybe we'll keep TV, and then it says, maybe we won't. I love that it has this kind of existential crisis through The Observer. But also, I like the idea of it seems crazy to think that in early 2000s, if you lived in Philly, you got to see 5 weekly indie wrestling promotions on a week. Like, I don't know all the promotions, but I know there was Ring of Honor, NWA Wildside, I think CZW, and 2 more apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem crazy that it was on TV. It is funny also that there's all this drama over a television show that it's seemingly no one really watched ever. Like, I mean, I guess that's sort of why there was the drama, but I've never really heard anyone talk about this ROH show. I've seen a little bit of it just on like YouTube over the years, but this was really a show that had no impact whatsoever on anything ever.
Yeah, and I noticed, I was looking at one of the kind of reports from the time, and they were starting to say, if you come a little early, we're taping something for the Ring of Honor TV show. I think I saw something like that, but they were trying a little bit more, but it still wasn't a high-effort production and wasn't a high-result production. One other interesting thing that happened in Ring of Honor in this month leading up to the show, is Dave writes, Ring of Honor is also planning on expanding next year to markets like Chicago, Milwaukee, Buffalo, and Detroit, which were all strong ECW markets. I think the interesting thing here is I looked it up just to make sure they did not expand into any of those markets in 2003. I think the closest they got was they did go into New York and New Jersey, so I mean that's getting close to Buffalo, but Chicago wouldn't come till I think 2004. No Milwaukee, no Detroit.
But Milwaukee came in 2004. Detroit didn't come until 2005. And did they mention Buffalo in that list also?
Yes, Buffalo was in that list.
That was also 2005. So I mean, I guess they had their roadmap pretty much planned out, but it took them longer than they thought to get there.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting where Ring of Honor does get bigger in 2003. They go to more cities. I think they do 20 shows compared to 12 for year one. But I just found it interesting that they had 4 cities laid out that, as you just mentioned, they did get to, but they actually don't hit any of them for quite a long time, even though they already have them in mind here and are telling Dave, hey, these are places we're thinking of going.
It seems like the biggest variance was all the different places in Boston that they ran.
Yeah, that will be a theme after our next show, which will still be in Wakefield, but the number of buildings and areas in Boston that they have to try and get to, it seems like it's almost a new place every show at some points.
Yeah.
And one last bit before we get to show news proper is I don't know if I had forgotten about this or just didn't know, but Frank Shamrock at one point was in talks, very preliminary talks, Dave says, to work a Ring of Honor show as a wrestler. Dave wrote in the first issue he mentioned this. He says, I wouldn't call the talks serious at this point, but he was in talks. And then a couple weeks later, Dave writes, nothing concrete on Frank Shamrock debuting as a pro wrestler with Ring of Honor. There have been more extensive talks over the past week with the idea proposed by Shamrock to do a 2-show deal, starting with a referee gig with an angle to lead into a match. If it doesn't happen, it would likely be due to the sides not agreeing to price. So, I mean, it didn't happen, so I would suggest that Frank Shamrock wanted more than Ring of Honor was willing to spend. But I think it's interesting just also in the context of Dave was, I think to this day, is still very good friends with Frank Shamrock. Ken, obviously, his brother, refereed on the second show. So Frank would probably know more about Ring of Honor than a lot of mixed martial artists at this point, I would bet.
Yeah, and I think that we lost out on very little by him not ending up doing it.
I mean, I'd bet you anything if he had come to Ring of Honor, he would have worked either American Dragon or Low Key. And if anyone could have gotten a match out of them, probably American Dragon at that point, out of a guy that's not trained really to wrestle.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's possible that he would have liked it so much that he would have become a wrestler, and he would have been a huge star.
Could have been the new Brock Lesnar, and then he'd never have shown up in wherever he did. I forget.
Yeah, now Frank Shamrock, I mean, I don't want to get off too much of a Frank Shamrock tangent, but as far as like in terms of MMA legends, because I'm not a huge MMA follower, he's not that big of a deal, right? Like he had a little, like very brief era where he was a pretty successful fighter, but it doesn't seem to last that long.
He was a top fighter, but the problem was he was a star kind of in the dark era of mixed martial arts, in the dark era of UFC, where it was after a bunch of, I feel like he really came to prominence after the first wave of UFC had cooled off and some of the pay-per-view providers had dropped them, and before Zuffa and Dana White came in and started running it. So he was. I feel like if a guy with Frank Shamrock's temperament and record came in today, he'd be a big star. But yeah, he kind of gets lost only to more of the hardcores, I think. Although I know Dave does mention how he drew big even in recent years in California. So
he's a local legend.
Yeah, probably somewhat between a local legend. I mean, he's a legend to people that really follow it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we get to the show proper. All Star Extravaganza, Ring of Honor's 9th show in its history. It took place at the Murphy Rec Center, as usual, in Philadelphia, as usual, on November 9th, 2002, and it drew a record 525 fans for Ring of Honor. That was its biggest crowd so far. It had been drawing, I think it drew 500 for the first Wakefield, Massachusetts show, and it had done in the low to high 400s. But the reason why it did so well this time was, as Dave writes in The Observer, an attempt to market an independent doubleheader in Philadelphia on November 9th turned out to be a major success, as both CZW and Ring of Honor drew fans from at least 5 countries and throughout the U.S. Gabe Sapolsky of Ring of Honor, which drew its largest crowd to date of about 525 fans, despite what would be considered a bad start time of 5 p.m., said the double header idea would be something they'd now be interested in doing once a year. Sapolsky contributed the increased crowd to both far more out-of-towners coming in and the East Coast debut of Shinjiro Ohtani, who he said received an overwhelming reception with tag partner Masato Tanaka. Still, CZW drew about 850 fans, among the largest crowds in that company's history as well, for a very different show, headlined by what was billed as the retirement match for Wife Beater, who is legitimately undergoing a second major shoulder operation soon. Among the places fans came from included Canada, Australia, England, and the Netherlands, as well as Texas, California, Iowa, Illinois, and throughout the eastern states. So, I mean, that's quite a lot of people coming for a double shot where the main draw, at least by the Ring of Honor end, is Shinjiro Ohtani is coming to the East Coast.
And seemingly the biggest draw totally of the entire thing was Wife Beater.
Yeah, I mean...
It's always funny when you go back to these old indie shows to hear, like, the different retirements that happened.
Yeah. It's funny to think, I mean, CZW of this period is something I completely didn't follow, so it's interesting to think how many people showed up because it was supposed to be the retirement of Wife Beater, as opposed to it's a big double shot, or Ohtani's coming and you're going to be in town anyway. Although, again, CZW did over 300 more fans apparently than Ring of Honor.
It's also in prime time, which I'm sure made at least a little bit of difference, right?
Yeah, and I find that interesting too, which is it's a reminder that Ring of Honor in the first year, it wasn't the head honcho of indie wrestling in all respects. I mean, it was taking the afternoon slot here. It was drawing the smaller crowd. If that had been a few years later, I have to think it would be the opposite. Ring of Honor would get the regular evening time slot. They'd be the one drawing the bigger crowd.
Although I do know, like, even in like 2005 when ROH wasn't doing as hot in Philly, like, you would still hear about Cage of Death, doing 1,000 people or a high 900, 800, something like that. I don't have the exact numbers, but it did seem that way. Like, in certain respects, CZW would outdraw ROH in Philly even in other eras.
That's interesting. I haven't checked the numbers, but I wouldn't doubt that being true. And what was my thought? It's also kind of almost quaint to think about the idea that maybe people came because it was a double header, like in the days now where WrestleMania weekend, people congregate for WrestleMania in a random city that's chosen each year, and a lot of people make a whole week out of it. The idea that in 2002, it was actually kind of a big deal that 2 promotions of significance decided to just run one night a doubleheader on the same street.
Yeah, although I am retroactively, like, I could totally see myself being really excited about it in that 2002 mindset. Like, oh, this is cool. This is like a whole awesome day of cool stuff.
Yeah, and it makes sense, especially with not just the people that came from outside the U.S., but even further U.S. states, the idea of do I really want to go for one wrestling show? Well, if there's two, I can get a hotel. I can make a whole day of it. I think it becomes a bit easier in some ways to justify making like a big trip and a whole weekend event rather than I went to see this one 3-hour wrestling show and went home. I could see people. I could. So in that sense, this doubleheader, that Gabe was really promoting hard before. Big success for, I think, both promotions. But there was a hang-up, which is a pretty predictable one, as Dave writes. However, timing was a problem for both shows. The Ring of Honor show went about 4 hours, about an hour longer than was originally planned. Nobody complained about the length because the last two matches in particular, a singles match with AJ Styles versus American Dragon, that got an almost consensus 4.5 star marks, and Ohtani and Tanaka versus Carino and Low-Ki, which got a consensus 4-star rating, were so good. Waiting for the fans to arrive from the ROH show, CZW ended up starting its show about 90 minutes late at 9:35 p.m., and the show didn't end until 1:40 a.m. So that's an example of Gabe's not being able to schedule a show actually hurting someone else for once. I mean, I can't imagine CZW was happy with that. And I know from reading live reviews, like I checked afterwards to read a couple live reviews, like the Death Valley Driver on the Road review, and they were talking about how you could tell some fans were getting antsy, like the show's going along, like is the CZW show going to start without? That's because I think it was down the street at ECW Arena.
Right.
And so I can imagine some fans, and that even maybe affecting some of the reactions with people kind of wondering like, hey, I've got another show to be at, and this is going way late,
Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it didn't seem like it was spoiling the reactions to the later matches.
I might disagree on one, but we'll see. Okay. The last little note here, several longtime readers reported that the Ring of Honor show as the best show in company history, which seems to be something in Ring of Honor early history. Every time Ring of Honor has a good show, Dave writes that, but I think this time it might have been true, but spoilers. The good wrestlers were all at the top of their game, and the comedy stuff was kept short, and the crowd reactions were tremendous as well. So saying all that, show proper, you put in your VHS tape or your DVD. What you see first is Steve Carino finding Low-Ki backstage. Low-Ki's hanging out with Homicide, and Steve tells Key that Spanky is out. He's not going to be in the main event. The main event was originally supposed to be Spanky and Steve Carino versus Ohtani and Tanaka, but WWF actually, who had just signed Spanky, pulled him out of the show. They filed the excuse they gave, that's a little leading. The reason they gave, apparently, according to the Observer, was they were worried that Spanky might get himself hurt working the show. Dave points out that they let Eddie Guerrero fulfill his obligations to Ring of Honor after he re-signed with them. But Dave writes, I guess WWE had more faith that Eddie Guerrero wouldn't get himself hurt. I don't know if I buy that or not.
I don't know if I'd feel the same way if I were WWE.
Yeah, Eddie goes out. I mean, was a little bit measured, but Eddie's the kind of guy who I could definitely see him hurting himself more than Spanky.
Yeah,
especially
Eddie got hurt doing his main move when he first debuted in the WWF.
Yeah, broke his arm bad. Yeah. So, I don't know if I buy that excuse, but that was the excuse given. But anyway, so they have this opening segment to set up the change. Key says it would be an honor to wrestle, Ohtani and Tanaka. But unfortunately, because Key's hanging out backstage with his boy Homicide gets monumentally cheesed off that Carino is there. He brings up that Carino turned on him at the last show, Glory by Honor, in that tag match. Homicide starts yelling. He says that his finisher is banned in Japan. He had just worked, I think, for Big Japan not too long ago. And Carino and Homicide argue a bit, and Carino leaves. So that's our opening segment that just establishes the change of the main event. And next, we got a techno music video, as usual, spoiling some of the biggest spots of the night, as usual. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, and I have a recollection that this continues for a pretty long time. Like they don't course correct on this one for at least another 8 or 9 months after this.
I actually,
at least for the big shows.
I think I looked ahead at Scramble Madness, and I think they do actually learn their lesson there. But it'll be interesting to see if they go in and out of this habit.
Yeah, I can definitely think of one show much down the line where they do it.
Yeah, and next there's something that we don't see on tape, but it actually happened live. The opening match of the show was actually Homicide versus Prince Nana, which was supposed to be Homicide versus Izzy from Special K, but Special K Izzy hurt his elbow. So we get this from live reports. It was just a short squash that wasn't very good. This is one of those things where the show doesn't have a lot of these short skits or pointless squashes. So it's pretty lucky, actually. I think the show would have felt different if it had a couple of these kind of matches that made the tape. So it's good that this didn't.
Good point. Oh, by the way, with the spoiler medley, one thing that they spoiled, which I think is really ridiculous, is they spoiled Tommy Dreamer's surprise appearance, which, I mean, one of the biggest things about that was that it was a surprise. So they really didn't know. Like, I don't know what the hell they were thinking with all that stuff.
And I mean, it's made by RF Video. You would think RF Video would know not to spoil things. I mean, you think they would know video production,
Sure.
like it just feels like they don't even have the knowledge or the drive to go one show earlier and cut up some clips.
Yeah, like a highlight video. Like they could also, I mean, like they ended up doing this years later, but like just a standard highlight video opening package that they could use for every show, so they didn't have to make a video for every new show.
Mm-hmm. And they even did that kind of with their boxes. The original Ring of Honor release boxes were all the same red box,
right,
with the same picture on the front. I mean, if they just had an equivalent for the video opening, they could have just done that, but
like
they never did.
Like the opening to every wrestling show ever.
Yeah. So we finally get to a actual proper match, and that is a scramble match. The Hit Squad taking on Divine Storm, taking on Special K, taking on the SAT, and the SAT win when Dixie when
the SAT.
Oh, I'm rattled, but the SAT win when they pinned Dixie in 9 minutes 14 seconds after they hit the Spanish Fly. Matt, let me try and get my tongue together and tell me what you think about this match.
Okay, because I am definitely not going to recap all the moves because it's one of those scramble matches. But the first thing I noticed was Joey Matthews as part of Special K. The last time we saw him, he was passing out in the back while Christian York and Alexis Lurie were trying to wake him up, and Special K was laughing. Now all of a sudden, he's in Special K. And it felt like this wasn't the plan to just suddenly have him in Special K. Like there was supposed to be something in between, but I guess maybe not. Maybe they were just like, oh, that's enough. That explains it. It doesn't. Doesn't explain it at all. But he's with Special K now, and the crowd is really into him as a heel. I think it might have been slightly go away heat, although I can't imagine why, because he didn't do anything too offensive or too exciting prior to this. But it also seemed like maybe it was like a lot of tongue-in-cheek, like it was fun to boo Joey Matthews. And he really got into it. He really got into the heel stuff. He did a good job. He actually looked really good in this match. But I did think it was funny that the previous segment was the whole was the entire explanation for the angle. At one point, Chris Lovey / Gabe Sapolsky does mention, what is just Joey Matthews doing, hanging out with these young kids? He's older than that. Everyone knows that. These 18-year-old kids. And you pointed out to me recently, Joey Matthews is like 5 years older than that. He was 23 in 2002. Yeah. So I guess it's a different perspective when you're an old man like us, but 23 doesn't seem that old to be living a partying lifestyle. But
at one point Gabe says, like, I'll just say, Special K, I thought the gimmick idea that Gabe sometimes tried to present them as was a good idea, which was they weren't just raver kids. They were rich, kind of privileged, spoiled brat raver kids that were thrill junkies that really didn't care about wrestling. And that's not a horrible idea, but Gabe I just thought I'd slip this in. Gabe describes Special K during this as, he goes, quote, Special K are not the people you want to hang around with. Unless you're 18 years old and you're living off your parents and you're going to raves all night and doing whatever people do at raves. I mean, that sounds what 18-year-olds would want to do. I mean, that doesn't sound... I think a lot of 18-year-olds would go, yeah, I like to go out with parties and still live at home at age 18.
Yeah, it's true. Although, I don't know, probably he assessed that a lot of the indie wrestling fans were much more like angry shut-ins who never got out and had fun except at wrestling shows. I don't know, maybe I'm just projecting here. Speaking only of myself. But yes, yeah, and by the way, that whole spiel that Gabe does about Special K, it's a perfectly fine spiel to characterize the characters. It was fine on this show, but he literally gives that same little speech during every Special K match on every show for the next 2.5 years of ROH. And at a certain point, the whole, he's too on the nose thing, that's one of the examples of him being way too on the nose. But like I said, the crowd really gets into Joey as a heel. Monster Mac tries like a wrestling and reversals thing with Chris Devine at one point, which I thought was pretty funny. Let's see, they do. First of all, I thought the Hit Squad were so much better in this match than they are in their shitty squash matches that they had the whole time. Like, they actually were a fairly good, I guess the word is base, for these guys to jump off of, and like they were kind of a good counterbalance to like hitting some of the power moves and stuff. The whole crazy Tower of Doom spot that you saw last month, I thought it hit a lot better here. I don't know how to explain it. It just fit well in the match, but I thought everyone looked pretty on. I thought, Mafia did a half Nelson suplex on Joey. The Maximos, they did this cool, like, taking turns doing German suplexes on Quiet Storm, and then hit double dives right after that. I thought the crowd really liked that spot. Then Joey kicked Joel Low, I should say, and Dixie hit this like forearm off the top. And then there was this sort of like awkward non-breakup thing. Mafia tried to pin Dixie, and like someone went for a breakup, and it didn't. I don't know. It was just really weird, and he had to kick out. But another cool spot, they did a double buckle bomb on Quiet Storm, where and so he did the buckle bomb onto Quiet Storm, which crotched Dixie, who was on the rope, and that allowed SAT to hit the Spanish Fly on Dixie for the win. And the crowd loved it. They chanted for the SAT. This didn't really get weird or boring. It just felt like you felt like they were learning how to do this match, and this is the match where they learned how to do it. Definitely the best the SAT has looked ever, in my opinion, so far. The best the Hit Squad has looked. The best Joey Matthews has looked. I thought this was a success of a match. These matches are never going to be like amazing matches, but for a fun, silly spot fest, I thought they did a really good job, and the crowd really liked it. Like, you could tell this was a really hot crowd. Maybe it's because it was earlier in the day. I don't know, but they were really into it. One thing I did notice, though, is the whole thing. Special K is one of those groups that doesn't shake hands, and Joey Matthews shakes hands. So, oops.
And I might have forgotten to mention, but yes, actually, Special K tonight is Dixie and Joey Matthews, so he's just a partner. I guess maybe that's Izzy getting hurt with the elbow injury, although that would have meant he would have been scheduled to pull double duty with. He was originally scheduled to wrestle Homicide. I don't know.
Before I knew the Homicide thing, that was my assumption, that they just rushed the Joey Matthews thing because of Izzy being hurt. But I guess if he was wrestling Homicide, then maybe not.
I'm not sure, because, I mean, we will see a bunch of guys in Ring of Honor pull double duty fairly regularly, but I thought this was good as well. I feel like this scramble compared to all the other ones was more suplex based. I feel like it just the mix of talent they had. They built to the big high flying spots at the end, I think smartly, but there was a lot more. The big spots were far more guys being thrown around than, and maybe because of that, I feel like this was probably the least botchy scramble Ring of Honor's had up to this point. There might have been one rough sequence with Chris Devine somebody, but otherwise there was no. Everything looked according to plan, except Dixie at the end of the match apparently broke his leg taking the Spanish Fly. I forget what bone, but he broke some bone in his leg, they said.
Oh, wow.
And you can clearly see when he has to come back later, he's limping. And even if you watch at the end of the match, you can see like people huddling over him. So it's weird because you don't think of the Spanish Fly as a dangerous move, but I didn't notice him limping before that. So I'm going to assume he hurt himself bad on the Spanish Fly somehow. Maybe one leg hit before the other or got caught or something.
Any move where you're flipping off of the top rope has some degree of danger in it.
It's easy. I could take it. Just like how you could tell a story in 7 minutes. I could take a Spanish Fly any day. My eyes closed.
Uh-huh.
But I thought this was probably the best the SAT looked in a while. Not that that's high praise.
Best
but
they've looked, period, I think.
Yeah. I feel like they were trying hard. The SCT are going to get a tag title shot at Final Battle, so we're going to get a bit of a push for them, and it felt like this match, some of the points near the end were designed to really make the SAT look strong. They had a big, I think, moonsault flying leg drop combo, which I thought was a big move that looked cool.
I also think that just having guys like Joey Matthews, guys who just aren't the kind of flippy guys in the match, add something to it. A little bit of maybe like a little bit of a glue of some sort.
Yeah, and I also, again, I just think it's easier to take suplexes than it is to do dives. Maybe not physically in terms of the impact, although it's probably depends on the suplex and the dive. But just if you're doing a bunch of twists and jumping off, turnbuckles or top ropes when you're sweaty and don't know how tight the ropes are, that seems to be a lot more dangerous than a guy just grabbing you and you jumping backwards with him. There's less margin for error in terms of maybe not danger for physical damage, but for having a big obvious screw up.
Yeah. And
I think that made the match run smoother. As you noted, Joey Matthews gets real surprisingly loud heat here. I don't know, like, that was on the last show too, before he had kind of completed his turn. I don't know why the crowd hates Joey Matthews so much. It's because he's getting I don't know how much of it is legit, like, or how much of it is go away heat, like you said, but he gets some pretty, like, they specifically chant after Joey Matthews. It's not Special K in general. I don't know what it is, but he gets a big kind of heel reaction. And to go from Christian and York, where he was nothing, to all of a sudden being kind of an over heel for Ring of Honor in a matter of a few shows with little explanation.
A few.
Maybe
literally one show.
Yeah.
He was with York last month. Then there was a backstage angle where he was passing out, and now he's in Special K.
It's just, yeah, I don't know. And one other thing I guess I'll mention is I looked up on Wikipedia a week or so ago, Joey Matthews, and he did have a drug problem since he was very young, like the kind of drug problem where you total 10 cars and are in and out of rehab. So I don't know if this was known about Joey Matthews. In looking back in hindsight, knowing all the drug problems he would have, like even after this, him playing a drugged out party boy character that gets dosed on the last show, that's kind of one of those weird squeezy, you just have to ignore it because it's wrestling kind of things. But one other note, only other note I have for this is Gabe says the Hit Squad just got back from their first Japan tour with Big Japan, and he says they got mobbed by fans there. I believe the first half, I don't know if I have a hard time believing The Hit Squad got mobbed by fans doing their. I wonder if they did like, "Yay, we're from New York, but we know you fans in Japan love the hottest hitting big Japan action. You got Hanma, you got."
Yeah, like, they actually mobbed the fans. That's at least in the other clips that we saw. That's what they were doing. Like that's what he meant to say. He was probably like the Hit Squad. They mobbed some fans on a bus. They didn't understand what they were saying, but they were mobbing them, and they really got them hyped up for the hardest hitting action.
They had a very big reaction when they left the bus and they realized they were safe.
I feel like ROH really turned the corner when they stopped having the Hit Squad stand around awkwardly on buses at the beginning of their DVDs.
Well, even here, they're more refreshing. They're not this overbearing presence where every Hit Squad segment is either them yelling about how great Ring of Honor and they are, or coming in and beating the living shit out of somebody. Like here, they're just integrated into a match where they're no bigger part or smaller part than anybody else. And as you said, they come off a lot better, I think.
A lot better.
Like, in this context.
Like they're a tag team who you might want to watch do some stuff. As opposed to just like the most obnoxious, over-pushed assholes in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I mean, I was never against, the Hit Squad are not a bad tag team. It's just the way they were presented.
Right.
So, yeah, better than average, maybe the best scramble. I kind of did miss some of the crazy flying. I kind of actually like the crazy botches. I think maybe I've gotten kind of perverted by watching all of this. But it was weird just to see one that's actually hung together well. But
so if you're an indie wrestler, just know that if Trevor Dame's ever in the audience, do some botches.
The first indie show I ever went to, a guy did a huge flying move and crashed near me and bled all over my shoe. So
is that the kind of botch you like?
I like all sorts of botches, but yes, I love when people bleed on me.
Okay, well, put it on Craigslist.
Okay, quick, let's change segments to the number one contenders trophy gauntlet match. That's a big mouthful, and this is I guess maybe before I say the match, this is to crown the first number one contenders trophy holder, and that was a Ring of Honor idea. It lasted for a fair bit of time, where they wanted an official recognized number one contender all the time. So the idea would be whoever wins the number one contenders trophy would defend it until they got scheduled for their title shot, at which point the trophy would become vacant, and they would have to hold new matches to crown a new number one trophy contender.
At one point, sorry.
No, go on. I was just rambling.
Oh, no, but like at one point, Gabe was like, "We know that secondary titles are bullshit in other promotions, and they mean nothing. So we don't like them. But we have this one, and this one's better because it means that you get a title shot, and it's a trophy instead of a title belt."
I did like the logic he used on this show, and I think one or two shows before when he first announced it, which was that Xavier got a title shot against Low Ki just by asking him, and Low Ki said yes. And they said after that, Ring of Honor decided they didn't want it to be that arbitrary again. So I do like that idea that, well, maybe that shouldn't have happened, where a guy was just like, hey, can I have a title shot? Yeah. And that didn't turn out well. So maybe we should have a trophy. But I think the only thing is it puts Ring of Honor in the position of they always have to now do these made-up matches to crown a new champion, number one contenders champion. And some of these matches can feel arbitrary. Like, for example, match one in this gauntlet is Michael Shane taking on CM Punk, and he beats CM Punk via pinfall in 13 minutes, 6 seconds with a roll-up while he holds onto the ropes. This is CM Punk's debut, and Gabe seems to be aware of how weird it is that he's in a gauntlet match for the number one contenders, and he's never wrestled in the company before. So Gabe mentions, Ring of Honor acknowledges what people have done outside of Ring of Honor. So, CM Punk's one of the hottest young prospects in indie wrestling, so he's getting a shot here. But then, like, moments later, he says something about how what only matters in Ring of Honor is what you do in Ring of Honor. So Gabe kind of all over the place here, CM Punk walks right into a number one contenders match. And the match itself was not the best way to debut CM Punk or anyone, I think. Michael Shane has really gone downhill. He's gone from someone who I thought was better than my memories to worse, or probably right where my memories were. I don't know if it's just him turning heel or what, but ever since after the unscripted show, the last couple shows, he's just been very plodding, very... Gabe tries to call it on commentary like, oh, he's an old school wrestler. He's very methodical. But his methodical wrestling here is just putting guys in lots of chin locks, lots of, headlocks, mugging for the crowd occasionally, being very slow. And I like methodical matches. I like slow, measured matches. He doesn't have the kind of nuance or detail work or presence to drive a match like that. At the same time, I wouldn't say this match was bad. I'd say it was average. CM Punk doesn't... It's weird seeing CM Punk at this age, too, because he's doing bigger kind of flippy moves that CM Punk in later years wouldn't do. He's doing a moonsault. He does the Undertaker rope walk, but he ends it with a leg drop onto Shane's arm. And really, most of the match is him working on Michael Shane's arm. It's Shane working over Punk, Punk gaining a comeback, working over Shane's arm a bit, then Shane taking over again. And you really don't get a great showcase of CM Punk. This feels like a match Michael Shane could have had with 30 other guys, that he would have worked the same way and kind of led the match. But it wasn't terrible. Punk got just enough to at least make you think, hey, I'd like to see this guy again. But for 13 minutes in CM Punk's debut, far from a highlight of his in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, the crowd really did like Punk, though, like before he did anything. Like, they were really into the idea of CM Punk being there. He definitely came in with the reputation from IWA and other places. So that was good. And I feel like the crowd was into it at first, but it was very slow for a long time. Chin locks, front face locks, basic arm moves. I thought it was pretty unique in ROH because, like, a match with so many basic holds. And by a certain point, you could hear little boring chants here and there. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, there were boring chants, and there was a "We Want London" chant, I think, at one point even.
That's pretty rare for ROH for the people to have boring chants. And in general, this crowd I thought was pretty hot on this night. So I was surprised by that. But, by the end, it was okay. There were a couple good spots. Shane hit this like really wicked like bicycle kick to Punk's face at a certain point in the match. Like I remember that being pretty intense. Punk got did the split-legged moonsault, which is, I don't know, it's interesting coming from him at this point. And Shane got his legs up. And then it's interesting because it seemed like Punk got tired at a certain point, which is surprising for a guy that, a few months later wrestled a 90-minute match and didn't seem to get tired. But like he botched like a kind of a flip out of the corner, like where like he's in the corner and Mike and Shane like pulled his legs out of it, like he was gonna like jack him onto his back.
Yeah.
But Punk does the thing where he flips backwards to land on his feet, and Punk botched that, which I don't see too often, and I was surprised to see that. But I thought they gave Punk a lot. It wasn't like Shane was the established star and he beat Punk. Like I said, it was 13 minutes. Punk moved out of the way from the elbow. He hit the Shining Wizard. And then he lost with a really cheap roll-up with holding the ropes, which never is, to me, that's never a satisfying way to end a match. Like, especially, if there's like decent near falls before it, it always seems like disappointing when a match ends with like a really quick roll-up with someone holding the ropes. I guess part of it is holding the ropes doesn't seem like it would make that much of a difference a lot of the time. You know what I mean? Like there's like a wrestling logic where if you put your hand on the ropes, suddenly you have so much more leverage to pin a guy. But usually the angles that they come at, it doesn't really seem like that would actually make that much of a difference. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Like how much leverage are you getting grabbing a rope?
Yeah, I mean,
when you're just sitting on a guy, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like there are certain times, like if you're like sitting on top of a guy's shoulders and you lean big on the ropes, I could see that. But just like grabbing the rope, I don't know. But also, I guess one of probably the least logical things about pro wrestling to me is like the way guys pin each other. I feel like wouldn't it make more sense if they really wanted to pin the guy to like just like lean your body across their shoulders, like do the earthquake sit most of the time? Wouldn't that be the most effective way?
I mean, there'd be a lot of more effective ways than hooking one leg.
And just the lateral press in general doesn't seem like it would be that effective.
Yeah,
Unless you're like so much stronger than the guy that you're pinning.
I wonder how it started with the lateral press. Like, wouldn't you always want to do almost the Kawada powerbomb where you fold the guy in half right on his shoulders, so all of his lower body weight's on top of him as well as all of your weight, rather than just I'm kind of lying on you like I'm the lattice topping of a pie where I'm just lightly draped over your midsection, holding one leg.
Yeah, I mean when you watch amateur wrestling, I don't know how much you've seen, but they don't do lateral presses, right? Like that's not the way that guys pin each other down.
I highly doubt it. I haven't seen much, but I highly doubt that's what they do.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, sorry for the aside, but
that's the best part of the show, probably.
It was a lame finish, is what I'm trying to say.
But I also thought it was interesting that I feel like nowadays when you have hot indie talent that's never worked the promotion before, their first match would be all out, and you kind of don't see things like this anymore, where it's much more reserved. And Punk, as you said, he gets a few big moves to shine with, and he gets a good level of offense, but he's not doing everything he can do. It's not this breakneck, I've got to impress everyone to get future bookings. I'm going to do everything I know to do. I can't let the crowd. I mean, part of that might be Shane is controlling the match and doing it slow, but it's just, I feel like this match, I never see this kind of performance from a debuting guy in an indie in 2017 ever.
Well, even at this point, Punk's calling card was his promos. Like he was one of the best promos on the indies, more so than his wrestling. Like he was a good wrestler, but he was a great personality. And I think like it must have been pretty clear to Gabe, when he started to book him, like, okay, we're clearly going to introduce this character slowly. Because they certainly, besides Punk not showing what he can do in the ring, he also doesn't show a third of his personality in either that promo from Unscripted or in this match.
He's basically a generic fiery babyface.
Right. And I think it's very similar to the Xavier thing, where they're clearly like doing this misdirection thing before they introduce the real CM Punk a few months later. And, in some ways that's probably pretty effective.
Yeah. I mean, they do not, even though this match on its own was just an average match, they obviously continue to have plans for Punk and keep booking him and have little storylines for him to come into with Colt Cabana next. So This is just the start. And we go right into match 2 of the Gauntlet series, and that's Michael Shane taking on Paul London once again. And Paul London defeats Michael Shane via pinfall in 4 minutes, 38 seconds after he hits a DDT, but it's kind of he hooked one leg with his leg. I don't know what you would call that, like a leg trap DDT. I'm not sure.
Yeah, kind of.
But Matt, I don't know how many thoughts you can have on a 4.5 minute match, but we're about to find out.
Well, I like that they went out right to the floor and started, whipping each other into the guardrails and stuff. I like that because we've seen them fight so many times, so obviously they're just like, okay, I just fucking hate you and I want to beat you up. So they didn't do the whole rigmarole of having the feeling each other out in the ring. And of course, it's obligatory that someone had to take out the guardrail in the first 30 minutes of this DVD, so that happened. But yeah, I thought it was probably the best they could have done with these two at this point was have them do a 4-minute, really fast-paced match where London wins, and also he hits like the quick DDT after he does the whole playing possum thing, which is what Shane did at Unscripted, where he pretended to be hurt and then he rolled him up quickly, and that's sort of what London did. He drops London face first on his knees, and then London sells his ribs for a long time. And then, they act like, oh, London's ribs are hurt, and that's when he hits the DDT and does the pin. I thought it was cool, like a good little poetic justice spot. Shane had his 13-minute match. I think we got enough of Shane in the ring, and we moved on to the Paul London segment, which was going to be like the excitement segment. So I thought this was done as well as it could be done in the all things considered, considering how many matches they've had prior to this, and what else was still to come in the gauntlet. I think I probably would have booked it the exact same way.
I think as a match, yeah, it was fine. I think the booking makes sense that London took the fall in the triple threat in the elimination 3-way on the last show, so he gets took the sliced bread number 2 from Spanky, and then Shane came in and stole the pin. While here, London gets his pin back, so I like that. That's keeping the feud going. And I like the playing possum finish that you mentioned, and Gabe did a good job of actually making sure everyone recognized that. He described it just as you did, except Paul London was still selling his ribs after the pinfall. So I feel like if you're playing possum, you should, once you've hit the move, don't sell it anymore, just to really emphasize. I mean, you could be playing half possum, but I feel wrestling's not good at that kind of subtlety. I think it would be better just to almost go the other way and do the big point to your head to let everyone know you're smart. And
I feel like London clearly was an ambitious wrestling actor and wanted to have the half possum subtlety added to the wrestling lexicon.
But that finish is the kind of finish on paper I love, which is it's a callback. It's, the face getting revenge in a smart way. He's giving Shane a taste of his own medicine. The only other thing I would say in this match that was perfectly fine for being short was Michael Shane does the worst Boston Crab I have ever seen in wrestling to Paul London in this match. For people who have not seen it, lie down and lie on the back of your head and your shoulders and hold your entire rest of your body rigidly straight in the air above your head. Now, have someone else come up to you and lightly hold that risen body of yours against them and just hold it there for 10 seconds, somewhere around that. And that is this Boston Crab.
Man, I feel like a new motif on this show is you really don't like Michael Shane.
I thought he was... That Michael Shane Spanky Brawl, I liked better. I liked all his early performances. I thought, hey, Michael Shane's better than I thought. But it's like as soon as the unscripted match ended and he started to really lean into being a heel, I thought his performance in the triple threat on the last show wasn't good. But Spanky and London also weren't great. But I also think here he's even Gabe on that CM Punk match where he's saying, he's a reserved, he's an old school, it's a meticulous, old-fashioned approach to wrestling. I feel like Gabe was trying to justify something even he probably didn't like because Michael Shane isn't around that much longer. And he went from being a guy
he's definitely not pushed that much longer, that's for sure.
Yeah. And he goes from being a guy that even the Observer was saying, ROH told Dave that they were going to get behind Shane, give him a big push. And this is kind of his peak right here. I would say maybe the last show.
Unscripted was probably the peak, yeah.
Yeah, unscripted, and then he beats London and Shane in a 3-way at Glory by Honor. And I think we're starting to go on the downslide. This was just a couple months after they wrote, Dave got word that they were planning a big push for them. So I have to think performances like this are one of the reasons maybe, or maybe he just had other obligations, but he does not get a big push like you maybe had heard. And afterwards we don't get a match next. We get Michael Shane goes to leave. He gets on the mic when Paul London wants to shake his hand, and he refuses the handshake, saying that Paul London's win was cheap, so he's being a hypocrite. Gets lots of boos. He goes to leave. He's actually getting a really loud heel reaction. And then who comes out but Tommy Dreamer? And Tommy Dreamer gets him to walk back into the ring. Dreamer gets on the mic in the ring and proceeds to cut, I would say, like a 10-minute promo. And it's a classic Tommy Dreamer ECW referencing promo. If you've heard Tommy Dreamer do a promo at your local indie, you've heard this promo. I thought it was good. he puts over Ring of Honor. He compares it to ECW. He talks about ECW. He talks about getting the tapes sent to him by Gabe and Rob. And then he wants Shane to do – and Dreamer also has a cute little thing where he talks about he's going to be working down the street, or not down the street, but somewhere else in the city that night because there was a WWF house show or WWE house show that night. And the crowd boos. And then Dreamer just goes, well, at least I get paid this time.
Yep.
And
the crowd really popped for that one.
Yeah, it was a very clever little move that completely turned the crowd back on his side with one line. And so yeah, he gets Shane to shake London's hand finally. Shane shakes it, but then clotheslines London, which pisses Dreamer off. He hits Shane with a DDT, tells the guy in the back to play his music, and he walks out slapping hands to Man in the Box. It's weird. I just said Dreamer's done this promo a lot, but I liked it here for some reason. I thought it gave a nice little endorsement to Paul London and Ring of Honor. I actually did not dislike this.
No, I thought it was really good. I thought it added to the DVD, and I thought it was perfect for 2002 Philadelphia. ROH needed that ECW credibility at this point because that was the gap that they were filling. And I think that this helped kind of bring that along.
And I can't describe enough how over Tommy Dreamer was to this crowd. They were hanging on his every word, reacting to every platitude. Like, they were really loud and really excited to see Tommy Dreamer here. Apparently, according to the Observer, the appearance of Tommy Dreamer had nothing to do with Spanky not appearing. So in other words, it wasn't a make good. Ring of Honor had contacted Jim Ross and asked him about using Dreamer or William Regal after Dreamer had suggested doing something at the Ring of Honor show. John Laurinaitis approved as long as Dreamer didn't take any bumps. So, you know, WWE giveth and taketh awayeth. They wouldn't let them use Spanky, but they would, even though Tommy Dreamer was working a house show that night, said, yeah, he can go here. He can cut a speech. He can DDT a guy. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But we go on to match 3 of the Gauntlet. And now it's Amazing Red taking on Paul London. And Paul London defeats Amazing Red via pinfall in 5 minutes, 50 seconds after he hits a shooting star press. Another short Gauntlet match. They tried to do a lot of cool athletic spots. I thought it was almost like a good WCWC show match where 2 really talented flyers would get 5 minutes, you know, and it wouldn't be something you would ever remember, but you would enjoy the spots they were doing. At the same time, Gabe almost ruined this match for me because the first 3 minutes of this match, Gabe is doing nothing but almost yelling, orgasmically talking about the Tommy Dreamer segment. He will not. He literally does not talk about this match, which is part of a number 1 contenders match, and he won't talk about it for, I would say, the first half of this match. He's just going, oh, such a big deal, like Tommy endorsed us, and blah 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 blah, and he just won't shut up about it.
But on the bright side, this is one of those Gabe moments which is clearly not contrived. Like, he's clearly like just actually super excited about it and wants to share it with everybody on the DVD.
I went back to the archive, you know, the Wayback Machine, and looked at the Ring of Honor website at the time. Gabe was so excited about the speech, he posted a transcription of it on the Ring of Honor website. Like, Gabe was super pumped that Tommy did this speech.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at a certain point you get kind of I guess immune to the excitement because all this happened a lot of times. But this is one of the first times that one of like the old guard stars came in and was just like, I've been watching you guys and you're making me proud. And I think probably did mean a lot to him. So it was annoying, but I can't hold it too much against him.
And again, in the everything I've read, it sounds like Dreamer reached out to them. I mean, I know Dreamer, I think to this day, is friends with Rob Feinstein, but the way they made it sound like it was like he was the one that offered to go, hey, you know, if you ask WWE, maybe I can come do something because I'm going to be in the same town this night. So Tommy was probably eager to give this endorsement. And What did you think about the match? Because I don't know. Again, another match where it's under 6 minutes. I don't know how much there is to say.
I thought it was, again, none of these matches can be great when they're short like this, but I thought this was entertaining. They pulled off a lot of the cool moves. Kind of the early stuff where they were like trading, like blocking arm drags and stuff. That was a little bit sloppy. They were trying to do a lot of stuff, but they did some cool reversals, like Red doing the baseball slide and London catching him and swinging him into the guardrail. I really was impressed with Red pulling off the standing top rope Rana, where they were both standing on the top rope, and Red jumps up and does the Rana off the top. I thought that was really cool. But I think at a certain point it got good. I would say it got good and was getting good, and then it stopped. That's what I would say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way it's not giving away because it's part of a gauntlet. So people, but we were talking the other day about a future Paul London American Dragon match, and because they have a match here in the gauntlet, you called that future one Dragon London 1.5, and that's kind of what some of these matches feel like, where
0.5 of a match, half of a match,
You think, hey, it's London and Red for the first time, they're just giving it away, but really they're giving you the 0.5 version. It's not their first real match in Ring of Honor. So,
and I would say in this case, this was more of a 0.25 if the London match was the 0.5. I mean, if the Dragon match was 0.5.
Yeah, this is even more insubstantial, because the match we get next, match 4 in the gauntlet, American Dragon takes on Paul London. And American Dragon beats Paul London via submission in 9 minutes, 17 seconds with the cattle mutilation. And this was a good match. This was not the great match they would have later on, but it was good. And
I would say I would say it was very good. Like that. But anyway, sorry. I'll wait till it's my turn.
No, actually, maybe it should be your turn, because I think I might have mixed it up. You should. Actually, you should talk about this one, because I should look at the notes.
It was short. I mean, like for these guys, because they have much longer matches later, but this was like a 10-minute match as opposed to a 5-minute match. So it was long enough to be a match. But I thought just the main thing that made the match so good to me was just how good American Dragon looked. He had missed the previous month's show. He was in New Japan. They mentioned that he had just come back from a tour in New Japan. And he looks so freaking great here. His offense, I mean, physically he looks good too, don't get me wrong. But his wrestling looks so good. His European uppercuts, which is like, this is when he really starts to perfect that. And obviously that's one of his signature moves for the rest of his career. Look great. All of the stretching that he does on London in the beginning looks super impressive. He wraps London's arm in the ropes and then goes to work on with slaps and chops and a drop kick. He's just a beast. They trade forearms, and in the middle of the ring, Dragon gets the better of it. And when London goes for a moonsault off the middle ropes, Dragon catches him with a drop kick and just starts stretching him again. Like he just looks so just such like a badass, and his offense is so great. I mean, his offense looks so much better than anyone else's I could think of, even at that time in the U.S. He's such a great wrestler, so young. This is still less than a year after the first ROH show, and he already looks like 4 times better, in my opinion, than he did at the beginning. And he was having like some of my all-time favorite matches even then. But just his personal, like the way he carries himself, the way he controls his body, and like the way he controls the match and the moves and what he does to other guys, it's so impressive. He looks like a level above everyone else. But yeah, so London hits the backdrop, standing moonsault for 2. Dragon comes back with a big clothesline. London flips off the top rope, and with he flips out of the top rope back suplex that Dragon does, and hits a Russian leg sweep off the top rope and goes for the shooting star press, but Dragon hits the superplex, Dragon suplex, cattle mutilation, tap out. Like I said, it wasn't a great match with the drama, but the execution of everything was so good that I can't see this being anything less than a very good 10-minute match.
I thought American Dragon looked amazing here, like you said. He gets huge reactions here, for, like you said, for the European uppercuts. I mean, guys were doing crazy spots in, for example, the scramble match. He gets a reaction as big as any move in that match gets. for how good these European uppercuts get. People applauding and hooting, and I mean, unbelievable. And I think I might have mentioned this on an earlier show, but one of the things that separates Dragon from almost everyone else on these shows is every move he's putting his all into. Where a lot of other guys, you see them do a move and you almost can see them in their head thinking, they're thinking about the big moves they're going to do later in the match. They're only half committing to what they're doing because they're thinking, the most important moves are down the road. I never feel like Dragon is anything less but absolutely 100% in the moment on every move. He is trying to execute every move so it looks as perfect as possible with his full intensity, his full commitment to it. It just completely separates him. And he already, like you said, he looks freaking incredible. I would say I always knew Dragon was good even from an early age because I had watched these shows. But looking back, I think you appreciate it even more now because I feel like Dragon was probably 80-85% of the way to his peak at this age. He's just missing maybe a little bit more working to the crowd and a little bit more experience. But, like, he's already fantastic at this age, at this level of experience.
Isn't it amazing that WWE had him at the time and let him go?
It shows you how much.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it shows you how much they changed. And actually, I was just listening to Dave Meltzer's podcast with Chris Jericho about the life of Chris Benoit, and he was pointing out how Daniel Bryan, if he had come up in the mid-'90s, he would have been a WCW cruiserweight. And if he had come up, a generation earlier, he might not have ever made it to WCW or WWF. Like, just how insane that is.
It is crazy. I mean, someone that good. I'm trying to think if there was anyone from previous eras as an analogous to Bryan Danielson, like in terms of height and skill, because Dynamite Kid was a decent bit taller, right?
And obviously, Dynamite Kid was willing to pump himself up like an over-grilled hot dog with steroids, which is something young Bryan Danielson wouldn't be willing to do, or old Bryan Danielson for that matter.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I feel like that's what the route was. If you were that short and that talented, you just got really stocky and you did a bunch of steroids and you got thick. And obviously that's never been American Dragon Bryan Danielson's MO.
I mean, it's so lucky for some of these guys. Like the fact that, because I know obviously that the reason that ROH was able to have such a good roster at this point was because ECW and WCW folded, so there was a dearth of places to go for some of these guys. But I also feel like a little bit of it was total serendipity that these guys all happened to be coming up right as WCW and ECW folded, because I feel like in other eras, even there wouldn't be this large group of amazing like artists type wrestlers who were into the sort of like the athleticism of it, weren't just focused on hardcore spots, hardcore moves, or being big, or catchphrases. They just like were really appreciative of the in-ring art of it and were kind of savants at it. The Low Keys, the AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Paul London, guys like that just happen. I mean, that just all happened to be free agents at the same time. I feel like if ROH had started in a different era, you wouldn't have gotten that. I don't think that there's just always that crop of guys, and the ROH just came along to take advantage of it. I feel like they both coincidentally came along at the same time, and it just was a perfect mix, and it gave somebody like American Dragon a place to become a legend in the U.S., and gave Samoa Joe a place to become a legend in the U.S., and, allowed Paul London to be noticed, and CM Punk to be noticed, and guys like that, where, because you look at the indies now, and there's a lot of great talent on the indies, but I don't think that it's the same where it's like you have this whole generation of just all-time greats, obvious all-time greats, in their early 20s at the same time, creating this amazing scene. I don't think that happens in every era, and I think this was just an amazing coincidence.
It was a perfect storm of guys who were really getting enthusiastic about wrestling in their teens during the wrestling boom and getting really influenced by Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart and the WCW great workers and the cruiserweight division. And then just as they're getting ready, old enough to enter the wrestling business, there isn't the wrestling business really to enter. There's one company that still has size biases and ECW is gone. WCW is gone. Japan's not even quite as vibrant. It's starting to go a little to cool off a bit. So you have a boom that creates this talent, and then the boom isn't there when they're starting to be ready to come in. And Ring of Honor is one of those companies that benefits greatly from that.
And they benefit greatly from Ring of Honor existing. Yeah,
absolutely. And going back to the match, the other thing I'll say is one thing I like, but what obviously other than the time limits it from being a great match, but I think is also one of its strengths, is they don't wrestle it like they wrestle it for what it is, which is it's the middle match in a gauntlet match. Dragon gets a lot of the offense in the first half. He builds to, London getting a few big near falls and spots at the end, but Dragon's always great at working with a mean streak, at dominating, and they're not trying to do everything here with their 9 minutes. They're not trying to work a 50-50 even-Steven match. Dragon has to work a big, long match later in the gauntlet. London's wrestled 2 times already, so it makes sense to work it the way they did, too. Sometimes with gauntlet matches, I feel like the problem is all the matches just feel like separate matches, and there's no connective tissue to it, where even in the first match of this gauntlet, Michael Shane sells an arm injury fairly well from Punk working on it. As soon as the second guy comes in to wrestle, as soon as London comes in, Shane completely drops it for that entire short match. Where, they look at it as separate matches. But I like matches like this where it feels like you can feel London, he's wrestled 2 matches already. And Dragon's a really, really good wrestler. So it's not going to be even Steven all the way. And they'll have their chance to have a 50-50 from the ground up, both rested match. And it's going to be really, really good if memory serves correctly.
And you could tell from this and I'm sure Gabe noticed it too, these two have great chemistry. They just clicked together. Like I said, they didn't do the all-out great match, but they clicked.
I think this might have been their first match ever together. I don't know if they worked elsewhere, but Gabe even brings up, I think, the interesting point of they were both trained in the same wrestling school, the TWA, but not in the same class. So they got this weird connection, yet they're not contemporaries like Dragon and Spanky are.
Right, exactly.
So that's an interesting element to it too. And moving on, we get the first ever defense of the Ring of Honor tag team titles.
Before we go on to that, I just really want to quickly get your thoughts on that entire gauntlet as in general, as like a whole, if you consider it as one thing. Because I thought that it's not like everything about it was great, but I thought the fact that it was there and took up the bulk of the first hour after an already pretty good scramble, I thought it really made this show already seem a lot better than other shows. It felt like everything in the first part of the show mattered. There felt like it was stakes, and it was more serious. There wasn't as much goofiness, no filler at all in the first hour. I thought it really got the show off to a hot start, those 2 segments.
I think it also makes a difference where everything has purpose. There's no jokey, dumb segments that are for angles that you don't give a shit about that feel inconsequential. Everything here is building to a number 1 contenders match. And I guess we should note that they said the final person in the gauntlet is AJ Styles, but to give Dragon a chance to rest, they're scheduling that match for much later in the show. So this isn't technically the end of the gauntlet. This is the end of the portion of the match where it's one after another after another. The technical final match of the gauntlet will be later in the show. But yeah, I thought I liked this as a whole. But I don't know if I quite liked it as a whole as much maybe as you're saying, but I think it's miles better than what Ring of Honor was doing before in their undercard. And again, everyone here is someone you're interested in seeing. I mean, Michael Shane's maybe on the borderline, but just that makes a big difference to me, where everyone here is even if I'm not interested in the match as a whole, it's yeah, I want to see what CM Punk's doing. Yeah, I want to see what Red's doing. Yeah, I want to see what London's doing. And you're getting all these first-time matchups, all like just spammed out at once. So that's kind of a really cool little treat to get.
Agreed.
London Red for the first time, Dragon London for the first time, CM Punk's debut, and it's all coming in what technically is one match. Agreed. But next we get the first debut, the first defense of Ring of Honor's tag titles. The Prophecy are defending against a team, except it's a weird 6-man tag for the 2-on-2 tag titles because it's Christopher Daniels, Donovan Morgan, and Samoa Joe, escorted to the ring by Simply Luscious, defeating Low Key, Doug Williams, and Homicide in 23 minutes 45 seconds via ref stoppage when Joe makes Homicide pass out to the rear naked choke, a.k.a. the Kakina Clutch. Okay, so this is really weird where Gabe says on commentary, the Prophecy has found a loophole where they said since they were given trophies and not tag title belts when they won the tag titles, and since those trophies say the Prophecy on them, the Prophecy are using that as an excuse to defend the titles in any form they want with any combination of people they want. So basically, free bird rules. And this is the first ever defense of the titles. It's a 3-on-3. Gabe doesn't seem to know what's going on because at one point he and Jeff Gorman on commentary talk about, I think Gorman asks, if the face team wins, who's going to hold the belts of the three of them? And Gabe just goes, I don't know. And
at one point, Gabe is like, "What kind of booking is this? The title's defended in a 6-man."
That's how he starts the match. He says, quote, "What kind of booking is this?" Like right off the jump, he's being self-deprecating. And it's funny because we talk about how Gabe's always the guy with too many answers and he's too direct. This is one of the only times he doesn't have the answer. And it's kind of a important question, which is who wins this, and why is this allowed? Ring of Honor is one of the rare companies where I'll actually say they might have needed an authority figure at this point because there's too many vague declarations from Gabe that ROH believes. ROH says this, and too many decisions that don't seem to have a really good explanation or at least the right mouthpiece to really sell the explanation. But as for the match itself, Homicide is taking Michael Modest's spot here. This was supposed to be Michael Modest on the face team, but he got into the argument with Gabe that we mentioned on a previous show. He's not going to come back to Ring of Honor, so Homicide benefits again. Gabe makes the interesting point that everyone except Doug Williams in this match has recently been to Japan. Daniels works in Michinoku Pro as Curryman. He actually outright says that Daniels is Curryman. Donovan Morgan works for Pro Wrestling Noah. Samoa Joe and Low Key work for 0-1. And Homicide just had a big Japan tour. So I thought that was kind of a neat way to praise those guys. And Gabe even goes, Doug Williams is in Japan, and I don't know why, but we're happy to have him. Like he almost is like chiding Japan for not booking Doug Williams, which I thought was cute.
I agree with him.
Yeah, me too. And this was another good match. It's again a match that's I keep pointing this out, but there's a lot of these matches that I feel like would be different in today's indies where they're not going 99 miles an hour right from the beginning. It's I don't say there's a huge story to this match, but it definitely has a beginning, middle, and ending where they build and ramp it up. They start a bit slower, and I felt Samoa Joe was the star of this match. I felt like Doug Williams looked pretty good. He'd be my second best looking guy in this match. I don't know about physical looks, but in terms of his wrestling.
Great. But now I'm going to be distracted trying to rank the how good looking these 6 guys are.
Yeah. Low Key number 1. I don't know. But so Samoa Joe was the star in wrestling ability because I would say he's 2 or 3 years away from his prime as a worker. But in terms of his physical peak, this is his prime. He is so light on his feet and spry. Every time his team is getting pinned, he's the guy just jumping in the ring right away, kicking to break up the pin and getting right back out. When they do this huge dive train at one point in the match, Doug Williams, this big thick guy, he does the dive from the top to the floor, and you go, man, no one's going to top that. And then Joe, instead of doing what he would do in later years, which is the really cool tope suicida where he leads with his elbow through the ropes, he does like a flipping dive over the top rope. Like Joe at this point was spry enough where he could like jump out of the ring over the top.
He's only done that move a few times. One other time that I can remember him doing it was in that famous three-way at Unbreakable in 2005 with Daniels and Styles in TNA. I can't remember him doing that move too many other times, though.
Yeah, it's something you wouldn't uncork a lot, and here, obviously, they build the whole dive train to it, gets a big reaction to see Joe do that, and Joe already feels like a hot guy in Ring of Honor, and he's only, I think this is his second match in, and everyone gets their moments to shine here. It's a little weird seeing Low Ki kind of take a step back, but he's not the focal point like he would be in almost every match he's in. But that makes sense when you consider he has a second match he has to wrestle that night. I like the tease at the very start where Joe wants to wrestle Ki, but then he get the Prophecy tag him out behind his back. I think they have Daniels tags Joe, and then Daniels gets in and teases that he's going to fight Low Ki, and then he tags to Donovan Morgan immediately. And I thought that was a nice piece of character work where Daniels is the chicken shit, not wanting to fight his biggest rival on even grounds, and also emphasizes the whole Joe's the hired gun who kind of actually has friction with the Prophecy who's paying him because Joe clearly wanted to fight Low Ki again, and Daniels denied him that opportunity. In fact, I don't know if they get any real big sequence in this match, or maybe they get a little bit. I'm not sure. But good match. Builds to some big falls at the end. Not a crazy show-stealing match. I never got the impression that they were taking time off, but I never also got the impression that they were trying to steal the show from what was coming later. And probably a good decision. What did you think?
I thought that it was like you. I would agree with you. It was good. I also would agree that Joe was the star, and I think that it was definitely by design. It's interesting. Joe, if you look at his history, every single time he comes into a promotion, I think the promotion ends up doing more with him than they expect it to very quickly. He came into ROH, he had that match with Low Ki. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, right? And already by this show, Gabe's like, all right, I'm putting you over everybody. Right, and then within a few months, he's the champion. Goes into TNA, same thing. He becomes the dominant star in TNA very quickly. WWE, I don't think that we would have anticipated WWE putting him in the SummerSlam main event, right, when he came in, and now he is. And I think, to me, that just shows just how amazing Joe is. Another thing I would say about Joe, he's not quite as fully formed here as Bryan Danielson was, but he's close. There's a degree of the intensity in the way he carries himself that isn't quite there by this point. But a lot of his in-ring shtick is there. A lot of the moves he does, he already seems like a star. His execution is really good. He seems like a world beater, and I think that that's what they wanted, and he delivered it for him. Like you said, Doug Williams was really good. I feel like everything that Doug Williams does is looks great at this point. His mat wrestling, his chain wrestling. He's maybe not quite as impressive as Danielson, but he's pretty close. I would say it's a different kind of thing. Danielson has this deep intensity to every move, whereas Doug Williams can make what you would think is pretty basic wrestling, counter wrestling, just super fun and entertaining. And I think it's a really good skill to have. The concept of the legal man was non-existent in this match. I'm not the kind of guy to get annoyed by that, but man, they were really just everybody was pinning everybody, coming in and out of the ring, basically scramble rules without saying it, even though it was a tag title match. But yeah, it was interesting. You don't really see a match like this where they really slow it down so much at the beginning on the indies. You even had a little bit of a pre-heat segment where the baby faces were cutting off the ring and attacking Daniels, and then kind of the Joe kept breaking everything up, and then the heels took over for a little while before they went into their dive sequence. But yeah, sorry, you're gonna say something.
I actually thought that that Daniel sequence was kind of weird because I feel like it's the It's the second match in Daniel's short tag run in Ring of Honor where he's had almost a face in peril sequence, where I think he had it also with Togo and Hidaka, a shorter one. But here at one point, all three guys on the face team are tagging out and taking turns of beating down Daniels. I think at one point, like, a couple of them that aren't the legal man have him in the corner and they're like biting him or not, maybe not biting him, but like choking him or attacking him or something. And it feels like he's playing the face for a little bit, which is, it's not, it's obviously, I thought the match was good. It doesn't kill the match for me, but it just felt it felt weird that the number one heel in the promotion was having an extended sequence where, you know, guys were tagging in and out, putting him in submissions, doing moves to him. You know, you don't want him to put him in a position where you feel sympathy for him, I think.
Yeah, true. And I guess, you know, heels and faces weren't so important to early ROH the way they were in other places. So I guess, you know, it's not as bad. But I did notice that too. I thought that, you know, like at parts, the crowd was a little bit quieter than I would have expected for this match. But they got up for all the right parts. And it was obviously a big push for Joe. I think we neglected to mention earlier there was a promo with the Prophecy where they were talking about, you know, where Daniels kind of chided Joe for shaking Low Key's hand, and Joe just got in his face and was like I told you, like, you hired me, but I'm not gonna dishonor myself and you know, not follow the code of honor. I'm gonna, you know, I'm not gonna embarrass myself like that. So he pretty much straight up said, I'm gonna shake hands, and he does at the end of the match after he wins. So there's a little bit of a structural kind of a mess, like it was a little bit all over the place, but I thought that it was good. Like it was I would say entertaining enough to be solidly good, and it got done what it needed to get done.
And the choke, it debuted the choke in Ring of Honor. And obviously when you debut a move like this, a simple move, it's not over at first. The crowd isn't expecting that to be the finish at all, with Homicide passing out in a choke, just a standard rear naked choke. But, you know, that's something you have to do. If you want to get a move like that over, you have to educate them.
You got to invest the time in to get the move over, and they did. After them, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think even Joe in the past has said that he and Gabe knew, like when Joe wanted to try it, that it wasn't going to happen all at once. It was going to take time.
Right. And and it's reaped the benefits. I noticed after the match that you had, you know, they really went right to the dissension. You know, Daniels and Morgan leave, and they push Joe out of anger, and then they run to the back, and he's kind of like walking after them a little bit, but not really like chasing them. He's kind of being calm, cool, collected. And then afterward, they really milk the reaction for Homicide. Like you know, it's one of those things where they leave the camera on him, and so the crowd slowly realizes they're supposed to cheer him. So they kind of give a big cheer for Homicide and chant his name.
Yeah, and they're saying that he passed out in the choke, so that, you know, Low Key and Williams are trying to, you know, talk to him and help him come to. And it's a segment where I actually feel like it could have used commentary because they stopped talking for this part. But once Homicide recovers, it's like he and Key shake hands, and Williams realizes he can't shake hands because he lost the stip match to Daniels on the show before.
I didn't even notice that.
Like it's easy to miss. That's my point. And he ends up giving them hugs instead of handshakes. And because there's no commentary, I think most people probably miss that. You know, that's just one of the ways, even though it's not a great story, I think that's a point where you actually needed Gabe on commentary to say, you know, look at him. He wants to shake hands, but he can't. You know, this is all because of Christopher Daniels. Damn him, you know.
Did they mention that at all on commentary, that he couldn't shake hands anymore? I don't remember them saying it.
I don't think they did, at least for this show. I mean, it will come into play later, but this is really, it's a blink or you miss it moment where it's pretty subtle the way it comes off. Because like you said, you're more focused on Homicide recovering, and it feels more like Homicide's moment. But then there's that point where he's recovered and Williams has to give them hugs instead of handshakes.
Right.
Because Key and Homicide get to handshake and he can't. But it also makes you realize it's not a big deal because he just gives him a hug. So like,
right, and nobody's mad at him.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, oh, you didn't respect us because you used two hands to show respect instead of one. I mean, But one other thing I really want to complain about this match, Simply Luscious keeps standing on the hard camera side of the ring, dead center, with her head often blocking things. And it's just, every time I see Simply Luscious, I keep looking for this thing that's going to justify why people early on were saying, oh, Ring of Honor sees great things in her. They think they're really impressed by her. She doesn't even seem to know. She doesn't cut a good promo. She's not a good wrestler. She doesn't even really seem to know how to position herself as a manager. And
well, that's something you got to be told, I would think.
But again, that's yet another discernible skill she doesn't have, which is just get out of the way of the camera. You're standing right in the middle of the shot. And there's a couple times where guys are doing submission holds on this night, and Simply Luscious's head is right in front of the guys. So whenever you're getting the hard camera shot, you don't see anything but the back of her head. And just a little annoying thing that bugged me. But now we're going to move on to what really bugged me. And this is the thing that made me the second most angry watching Ring of Honor in the rewatches so far, apart from the incredible homophobia of our now famous opening segment to our first episode. This is Alexis Lurie taking on and defeating Allison Danger, escorted to the ring by Mace, no Buffy here, via pinfall in 3.5 minutes after hitting an inverted DDT. This was fucking dreadful in every way you want to dice it up. I know it's your turn, Matt, but I have to
go ahead. Go ahead. I need to hear this.
This is Gabe Sapolsky. Like we've heard on other shows, Steve Corino be sexist with Simply Luscious and nearly orgasm watching her wrestle and talk about how fun it's going to be to see women have a cat fight, whatever. Gabe Sapolsky, you would think, well, maybe that was just Steve on his own. Gabe is just as bad here, if not worse. I think one of the first things he says when this match starts is, quote, they're going to be touching each other. They're going to be hitting each other. They're going to be spanking each other. This is going to be good. And Gabe has this weird voice I've never heard him use before or since, where he has this weird, like, pervy, breathy voice he uses for a couple moments where he kind of talks like I do when I want to make a joke and I'm not sure it's going to land, where it's like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like when he says something really like he's almost embarrassed that he is saying these things, but he keeps saying them. At one point he even says, when did I become Jerry Lawler? It's like, it's really weird. He's almost self-aware that he's doing something really stupid, but yet he will keep doing it. And I'd like to say it was just the sexism that was bad, but this match was easily the worst match in Ring of Honor history thus far. Allison Danger, I remembered her being a fairly good, competent women's wrestler years later. She is fucking dreadful here. She barely does anything here but do upskirt shots, cheating, and taking bumps. But even how she takes bumps, how she moves in the ring, she looks barely trained. Like, fucking horrible. And it's just, Gabe on the show yet again did that stupid thing where he's like, Ring of Honor's not sports entertainment. And yet all we've seen on these shows is we've seen some really good wrestling, some really serious stuff, but we've seen all the worst parts of sports entertainment. We've seen homophobia. We've seen violence against women, because I'll note Mace cold cocks her, Alexis Lurie after the match. So we continue the streak of every Ring of Honor show has had a man hitting a woman on it. Every single one, as if it is a rule they have that has to be an element to the show. We've had the homophobia, the sexism, just the goofy gimmicks and things that are just so dumb and don't make any positive contribution to the show.
The only thing we haven't had yet was xenophobia, as far as I can tell. That's the only common wrestling trope that I haven't seen yet in ROH.
And ROH had an FAQ on their website at the time, and someone asked a question referencing the Katie Vick angle. And again, Ring of Honor got all high and mighty, we won't do any kind of angle like that. It's like, you're doing every other fucking angle they're doing at that time. You're doing so many of the stupid things they're doing, and you're acting like you're so far above it. And it just, I realize women's wrestling was not taken as seriously in the U.S. as it is now. They didn't have the more vibrant women's wrestling scene on the indies. WWE sure as hell wasn't taking it more seriously.
Although they were just starting to take it more seriously than this.
Yeah, and I don't get how you can be so progressive, like on the men, be like, oh, we're gonna Ring of Honor. They're on the first year, their banner said, "We don't imitate, we innovate." Yet when it comes to all of this stuff, it is exactly what WWE was doing, if not a little bit worse, like you're just alluding to. And I don't get how you can paint yourself as progressive in one end, and on the other end, literally mention, "Oh, I'm being like Jerry Lawler right now."
I guess the best you could say is like they were young and sexist guys, and maybe they learned their lesson over time. That's what you hope. But yeah, I mean, this was obviously shitty. I didn't have the strong reaction to it the way that I did for the Christopher Street Connection thing, just because this is still kind of par for the course of wrestling. So I'm a little bit numb to it. Like, this is a shitty women's match with a pervy announcer. But it did, still include, some of the elements of, like Allison Danger crawling slowly over her. Like, oh, this is so gay, isn't it so bad? That stuff. And also, I agree with you. She was really bad here. It'll be interesting to see, because there are matches involving her in 05. It's interesting to see if she gets better. Obviously, we know that Laree has much better matches in the future. Maybe not in ROH though, but it's interesting that Laree is sort of treated as like such a talent, and they don't really let her. It's another situation like like a few other guys where it's like we don't really get to see what's good about her. Like Alexis Laree, in the time she's been in ROH so far, she seems like, besides a couple moves that she does, she seems like an interchangeable, body in there. There's nothing that they do with her that makes her stand out, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and like you said, it's weird because they are positioning her as kind of like their big women's wrestler, where I would say 2/3 of this match's commentary is sexist, creepy bullshit, and 1/3 of it is Gabe putting over how great an athlete Alexis Laree is. And I mean, she does hit, I think a big dive to the outside, and she is better in that sense than the Simply Luscious and Allison Danger. Not that that's a high bar to clear, but then you look at how they're positioning her. The angle at the end of the match where Mace punches her, that sets up what they're announcing as Mace versus Alexis Laree on the next show. So again, you can portray her as the serious athlete and this great prospect, but you're putting her in the usual
side show. Yeah.
And I guess one of the signs that this show is better is that in a lot of the old Ring of Honor shows, the earlier ones we've reviewed, it feels like there would have been 2 to 4 of these segments. Here it stands out as like the one really terrible, offensive, pointless, goofy waste of a segment.
2 to 4 of these segments plus like backstage stuff about it, and this is just as kind of a self-contained piece of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
They also, I said this before, obviously all portrayed violence against women is bad, but it does seem a little bit worse when it's literally a punch in the face, as opposed to some silly wrestling move, which is what Mace does. He punches her in the face, and then he suplexes her, and then he wipes his hands like, ooh, it's gross to touch a girl. Yeah, I agree with you. This sucked.
Yeah, and obviously, again, it's like we're getting this weird separate division now of, it's not a women's division, it's a women and gay people division. It's like you said, the sideshow.
Exactly.
And
the sideshow with an added element of like clearly offensive, regressive ideas and attitudes.
Yeah, and I like some offensive things in life. I mean, we all have things that we like that we feel a little guilty about or a little bit weird or that might bug other people.
Problematic faves.
But this isn't even – I don't think this isn't even entertaining. The match was terrible. The comedy wasn't much of it, and it wasn't very funny. I mean, it's not even titillating. Anyway.
It would have been funny if at the end of all that you said like, but I have to admit it was titillating.
I have to admit I was very gratified by this match. I was like, man, you thought that was a criticism. I love this. I hate women. But Next, we had another little short segment, but relatively painless.
With a bunch of little short wrestlers.
Bunkhouse Brawl from the Carnage crew of H.C. Loke and Tony DeVito, defeating the Ring Crew Express of Dunn and Marcos, who for the first time are actually called with graphic and everything, the Ring Crew Express.
Well, but wait, hold on a second. I have to correct you. This is the first time they're called the Ring Crew Express, but they are not just referring to Dunn and Marcos. The Ring Crew Express is the entire Ring Crew going up against the Carnage crew.
Because not only do they wrestle, it's not a 2-on-2 match, it's a 2-on-2, and then some other Ring Crew guys run into the ring and also wrestle or basically just take a couple bumps match. So the Carnage crew win in 2 minutes 40 seconds when Loke pinned Marcos after they hit a spike pile driver off the second rope on him. Not much to say about this. It was short. The Ring Crew guys got beat up.
Well, the idea of it was that this was a warm-up for an upcoming bunkhouse match they were going to have against Homicide and Abdullah the Butcher.
Yes, I was going to say this was basically just an excuse for Gabe to plug the upcoming match for 2.5 minutes. Even though it was called a bunkhouse match, really there was just a couple chair shots, and otherwise it would have been a completely normal legal wrestling match. Like a scramble.
They should have done a full-on just like bunkhouse stampede, like in a cage, where where they had to throw all these guys out of a cage.
I would love if they put a cage and they tore it down and built it up and tore it down just for this match, especially considering that this show went an hour late and CZW was waiting.
Well, also considering the Ring Crew was involved in the match, so they'd have to put up the cage, get into it, then get thrown out of it, and then take down the cage.
That would be great if the Carnage crew yelled at them and watched them take down the cage after they beat them.
Yeah.
That honestly is something they should have made them do at least once.
That's true.
There should have been at least one of those things where do one of those crazy, occasionally Ring of Honor brawls where they would save that for the main event, and then have the cameras stay on afterwards and have the Ring Crew have to take apart the ring that they just wrestled in, while they're selling. I mean, that would have been incredible, actually.
Would have been. Fun story. Sometimes in ROH, back in the old days, they would actually ask fans if they wanted to help take down the ring. And I remember one time, Rhett Titus was like, "Hey, you want to help take down the ring?" And I was like, "Sorry, I gotta go, man. I didn't have time to stay and help take down the ring." But ROH, they had all these big name wrestlers, at least to nerds like me. But they were still, a mom and pop organization for a while, with needing the help of the fans.
With apparently lazy Ring Crew members. Rhett Titus was like, "Hey, you want to be part of the business, Matt? Hey, you help me lift this plank."
Yeah, somehow he knew my name. I don't know.
Somehow you weren't fooled by this.
Yeah. No, he was just. They were asking honestly. It wasn't like they were trying to lure me. It was just like, "Hey, you want to help?" And I was like,
I mean, I'm sure some people would get a kick out of that, but it does feel kind of weird. And I also, I mean, I guess it's better having them help take it apart than helping set it up. Hey, random guy.
I imagine there's some skill involved in setting it up.
Yeah, hey, you'll figure it out. I'm gonna get a nice tea. I'll come back to you in 15 minutes with a brisk. And
that's why you had those those ECW matches where they went through the middle of the ring, like Bam and Bigelow and Taz. They got some fans to set up the ring. They had no idea what they were doing.
Big Show is a huge fan of every time he wrestles Brock Lesnar, he's like, "This is a big match. I gotta prepare. You know what? Let's get a kid down here. It's going to be my good luck charm. Helps up the ring, kid. It's going to be an experience of a lifetime for you." And then
like a literal small child setting up the ring, leaving a big hole in the middle.
It's like, you've done enough. It's never going to matter. I'm not going to look at me, kid. Do you think I'm going to take a superplex tonight? How often does that happen? That's not going to happen tonight. You don't worry about it. You leave the center. It's okay. But anyway, next segment was Gary Michael Capetta in the ring, and he introduces ECW alumni JT Smith, Mr. You Fucked Up, the guy who originated those chants when he legit fucked up moves, and then the crowd would chant that, and then it eventually became a loving gimmick. And JT comes out. Gary remarks that JT hasn't been in Philly since 1997. I don't know if that's true or not.
Wait, but Gary hasn't been? Oh, JT hasn't been in Philly.
Yeah, Gary says JT.
Gary was just there 2 months ago.
Yeah. sneaking in. And Gary here, remarks this is his first appearance in Philadelphia since 1997. JT Smith gets in the ring, and I can't understand what he's saying.
Nope.
I obviously Ring of Honor, anything over the house mic is hard to listen to, but I've never heard it this bad so far in the rewatch. I could not make out what he was saying. Joey Matthews comes out with Special K's other members, Dixie and Izzy. Dixie's like limping and using a makeshift crutch because of his leg injury earlier. Joey gets on the mic. I can't understand what he's saying. At this point, they eventually call down JT, I guess, enough that JT attacks them. Special K starts attacking JT Smith. Then the big, mysterious, tall man with the dreadlocks and glasses comes into the ring, clears house, helps JT Smith up, shakes his hand, walks back to the crowd.
Well, you missed that the Outcast Killers made the save, even though the only time the ROH audience has even seen them before is when they jobbed in a minute to the Insane Clown Posse.
Exactly, in a match that did not make tape. So if you were just watching the tapes, and this segment, when this beatdown happened, they didn't mention who their names were. I don't know if there was even commentary for that part. So you would have no idea who these guys were. You don't see them again after the match on this show. They're not announced. They're not named. And there's a million reasons this segment shouldn't be on, but I would say the number one is the simple one, which is you could not understand what they were saying. I went to other reviews to see if maybe they heard it. Other reviews said I don't know what they were saying, and yet they left it on the tape. I mean,
just so we can have a segment that really advanced that Slugga storyline of him coming out and doing the same thing he always does.
Yeah, and I felt bad for JT Smith because, obviously he was not a big star, but you see Tommy Dreamer get a big respectful thing, and JT Smith barely gets a chance to talk. It's inaudible for anyone at home, and he's basically just fodder to put over Slugga and the Special K. So I don't know if there's anything else to say about that. Just, whew. But that's the last of those weird segments we're going to get tonight, because we move on to the Ring of Honor title match. It's Xavier making his first official defense with simply Luscious at his side, doing his ring introduction for him, in fact, taking on and defeating Jay Briscoe in 20 minutes, 52 seconds via pinfall after he hits the X-Breaker neck breaker with Jay on the top turnbuckle. Matt, what did you think? Did you think this was better than the first match these two had?
Definitely better than the first match. The first match was kind of on the low average to bad side, I thought. I thought this was decent to me, almost goodish. There were a few reasons for that, making it good. For one thing, Jay Briscoe, his blade job, really added to the match. He bled a lot. His selling, I thought, was pretty good. And Xavier did a decent job as if he a mid-card heel beating on a bloody underdog opponent. The problem is that this was not supposed to be a mid-card heel. He was supposed to be the ROH champion, and he did not seem like that. But they had some. They kept their storylines going. Gabe got really, really mad at simply Luscious interfering and trying to trip Jay. He started yelling about how this was everything that ROH is against, and went on and on and on about it to the point where I was like, "Geez, it's not that big of a deal." I almost was like, "All right, I'm almost on the privacy side if you're gonna be this much of a dick about it." Jeez, I thought like Briscoe, I think in particular looked good here. Xavier looked better, I would say. But still, just he doesn't have it to be at that level at this point. But I thought Briscoe looked legitimately good. It's unbelievable that Briscoe was still 18 or maybe almost 19 at this point. Because I thought that his selling was really good. His intensity was good. I thought he was getting over. The crowd really liked him. Especially when he bleeds, they really start getting behind him. I thought that Xavier, he still has some cool moves. I really love that thing where he springboards from the top rope, where springboards his legs onto the middle of the top rope, and then does the moonsault or Arabian press onto the outside.
The Arabian press where you jump from the top to the ropes to start it. I mean, and it's to the outside. Yeah, like you said, especially for a guy that thick.
Yeah,
I mean,
that might be one of my favorite moves, and I've only seen Xavier do it, so I think that's really cool, and it always to me it always looks good. Um, and there's also at one point the announcers talk about a storyline involving like the reason that Jay's parents weren't there for his title match, and it was because quote Gabe, Mark kept his parents there from being at the show because he had to make up some quote fake family emergency thing. And I was wondering like how does Gabe know that it's fake or how does Chris Levy know that it's fake? Like he investigated this and if so why didn't he tell the parents about this?
ooh.
Like but so he's sure that it's fake. But that's why the parents aren't there.
What I love about that is Gabe goes on that he mentions that a few times, like, oh, Mark deprived his brothers. His parents would have been here and they're not here. And finally, it's like he almost feels like he has to make up a better excuse because near the end of the match, he says Mark told his parents that he totaled their pickup truck.
Like, why didn't you say that earlier?
And also, like, that's also not the best thinking on your feet, but I have to admit, accidentally, I think Gabe came up with like a perfect Briscoe family crisis because that feels like one. Like, we can't come. Like, did someone die? No, Mark totaled the pickup truck.
The Dodge pickup. Yeah.
Where are we gonna move the chickens in now? So, I thought that was kind of cute, but
yeah, that's a good point. The crowd liked Jay. I thought, they were into it. They weren't like emotionally invested. Like it wasn't like they were like, please don't tap or anything like that. But it was. I thought that they liked him. It gets by the end. It gets to like just Xavier hitting the big moves. He counters the Jay Driller, hits a Cobra Clutch suplex. Hits Kiss Your Ex Goodbye. Gets two. Jay, goes for a moonsault, but Luscious throws the chair throws in a chair to distract the ref, and then runs around and crotches Jay, and that's when Xavier hits the neck breaker for the 3. So again, much better than last month, but it just didn't feel like a title match, like a world title match, and that's a problem when the title is new. You can't establish a title by having it be in mid-card matches.
And something we talked about online before the show, a couple days ago, is this is a match. It's a ROH title match, and it's on the show before the finals to a number 1 contenders match for the ROH title. And granted, on paper, it's obvious why, because American Dragon and AJ Styles is a much bigger match than Xavier and an 18-year-old Jay Briscoe, or an any age Jay Briscoe. But it's still, in terms of just pure like in-character storyline, it's just really weird that the world title match goes on directly before the number 1 contenders match. And it's just another sign they didn't really have faith in Xavier, yet they still kept him as champ. They made him champ. And I thought this was an average match. I thought...
You didn't think it was any better than the previous one?
I thought it was better than the previous one. But I feel like it got more time. It had more bells and whistles. Jay bleeds and looks like he has strawberry syrup poured all over his head. I think Jay's one of the best blade guys of his generation, which is something you don't get to see much of now because the number of guys that bleed is less, maybe good, maybe bad. But I thought it was a better match. They did more. They tried to make it longer and more epic, I think, in feel. But I think I expect more. Like, I've seen enough Xavier matches now where I'm like, all right, you're getting a bigger push. You're getting more time here. And his performances aren't that much. They're not that much better. They're a little bit better, but they're not that much different than his earlier matches, except they're longer. Like, he doesn't work that much different as world champ than he did as undercard babyface. He growls at the fans once in a while. He feels like a guy. He doesn't have any hook to him. There's no urgency. There's no. I never feel the passion from him. I feel like he's just mechanically fine and great body, and even Jay here shows some babyface fire. I don't see anything that like hooks me that way.
Wrestling is the only place where you could be like criticizing a guy and then just randomly throw in the phrase "great body" and it doesn't sound super weird. Just like, he should be a better actor. Great body, great body.
perfect body, just great.
He's not the most. He's not a. His Senate voting record is just not what I was hoping for. Great body.
I mean, have Orrin Hatch. I mean, I didn't agree with his last vote on healthcare, but man, did you see his obliques? Something fantastic. Yeah. You should see him in a gym locker room. But
and I have.
They should call him Orrin Habs. Okay, edit that out. But
do I have to?
But no, you don't.
Okay.
But we've edited too much to my audio mishaps for those who have not heard the behind the scenes, which we are saving for Through the Years Uncensored podcast way down the road. But average match, I like some of Jay Briscoe's fire. I think the crowd was surprisingly quiet during parts of it, and they were chanting "fuck hat guy" from the old ECW fan who was there just to entertain themselves. I feel like they started to get into it. About a third to half of the crowd got into it once Jay started bleeding. I feel like that shows you the power of blood, because I feel like that did hook part of the crowd into the match.
Made a huge difference.
Like from that point on, there's a portion of that crowd gets engaged.
I probably have this match like a star higher than it would have been if it wasn't for the drama added by Briscoe's blade job.
Yeah, and again, he's one of the great bleeders. A couple interesting notes I found on this match. I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a point in this match where Simply Luscious throws a chair in the ring, and I'm thinking, and you mentioned a different one earlier, and I was thinking at this point, okay, the ref's going to get distracted removing the chair, and something's going to happen. And at this point, Xavier's on the mat lying, and Jay's on top, and he's about to do a move. Well, the ref, to my surprise, just calmly removes the chair. He doesn't get distracted for a second. Jay hits, I think, like a top rope leg drop, gets a big near fall. And I thought, why did Simply Luscious do that? It served no purpose. She threw a chair in. He immediately threw it out. No one got distracted. Didn't help Xavier.
To give Gabe an excuse to start yelling.
But a few minutes later, Jay Briscoe goes back up to top for the finish, where he's going to do another high-flying move for a moonsault or something this time. And that's the pouring where the end happens, where Simply Luscious throws a chair in. This time the ref gets distracted removing it as opposed to the first time. And then she's able to crotch Jay, and Xavier hits the X-Breaker for the win. So my point is, I think Simply Luscious, someone must have told her before the match, when Jay goes to the top rope, you throw the chair in the ring. And she must have fucked it up or not been expecting Jay to go up earlier in the match, because it looks pretty clear that she did the finish spot and it wasn't time for that spot, and the ref rightly just ignored it, and the wrestlers ignored it. And then a few minutes later, when Jay goes back up to the top, they do the spot correctly.
I might have missed that because there was a little bit of skipping in my DVD, so that might have been where it happened.
Because I felt it was weird, but then the end completely explained it for me. There was also a moment in this match where where Simply Luscious is choking Jay on the ropes, and the ref has to do one of those WWE, WCW things where they ignore it for 100 years, where he's looking at every other side of the ring and pointing to random things. And eventually he can't stop ignoring it. So he turns and looks at Simply Luscious and Jay, points to them, then turns back to the other side of the ring and points at something random while still yelling at Xavier. And Jeff Gorman is like, oh, the ref didn't see it. And Gabe gets really angry in his angry yelling voice. He goes, of course the ref didn't see it. He literally pointed at Simply Luscious choking Jay Briscoe on the ropes. And Gabe screams at the top of his lungs, of course he didn't see it. And it was just another weird, aggressive Gabe moment. But yeah, average match. Crowd wasn't super into it, into the blood. Still probably one of the better Xavier matches, although it's a 20-minute Xavier match. Fuck hat guy. I'll share the crowd's sentiments all these years later. That's about it.
Well, it's just one weird thing I was thinking, totally random thought. Wouldn't it be weird to go through life, like just even for a short period of time, and like refer to yourself and have people refer to you as Simply Luscious?
Yes.
like just imagine like, oh yeah, that's me. I'm Simply Luscious. That's what they call me. Simply Luscious. Oh, hi. Nice to meet you. I'm Simply Luscious.
Hi,
it's gotta
I'm
be weird.
Simply Luscious. But I think we went through that once in one of the early Ring of Honor shows where Rob Feinstein in a backstage segment with her when she's complaining about something, and he has to call her Simply Luscious, like by her full 2-word God-given name, Simply Luscious. Like, hold on, Simply Luscious, I'll handle this. Don't worry. Like,
I just can't imagine being called that. Like, if she must have laughed at least at some point when someone's called her Simply Luscious. Like, that's got to be just an embarrassing name to have.
Simply Luscious is a name where if you were a stripper and someone was saying, all right, here's a list of proposed names we got, you'd be like, whoa, Simply Luscious, that's way too over the top for stripping. Like, let's take it down half a step. Like Fuzzy Peaches, that's good. Simply Luscious, are you kidding me? And yet that was her wrestling name, Simply Luscious.
The more I think about it, the funnier it is. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go on.
So something that was not funny, but aroused me just as much as Simply Luscious, actually way more than Simply Luscious, no offense to her, was the finals of the number one contenders trophy gauntlet match. And that was AJ Styles defeating American Dragon in 22 minutes, 30 seconds via pinfall after he hits the Styles Clash, actually his second Styles Clash of the match. And this was just a great all match. This was really, really good. I think this was the first time these two had ever wrestled. Gabe at one point on commentary mentions that these two had requested earlier in the Ring of Honor runs to the bookers that they wanted to wrestle each other. So, surprise, surprise, in this gauntlet, what a great coincidence for them. They get to wrestle each other. And just so good. So, especially for two guys probably having their first time match. There's an opening sequence where AJ and Dragon go to the mat, and they're just doing really fast reversals. And a lot of times in wrestling, when guys do really fast, like chain wrestling and reversals, it eventually, like, they lose the grip, and it starts looking like two guys playing leapfrog. But here, they hold on just enough while going super fast, and it looks really great, gets a great reaction. And it's funny, like, AJ Styles is a guy I think is really game at this point. I think people stereotype him at some points at this age of his career, of his life and his career. But I feel like when he wrestled Low Ki, when Low Ki got stiff, he got really stiff right back and like gave him a black eye, I think, at Honor Invades Boston. And when Dragon wants to do like technical wrestling on the mat, Styles will more than just hold his own with him. He's really adaptable. I think he's eager to do whatever his opponent wants to do, which I think sometimes wrestlers who get like stereotyped as, oh, he's just a flyer, he's just one note. You have to watch what they're doing with guys who, when they wrestle guys that aren't their typical kind of opponents, because I think guys like AJ will show you they're willing to go different places if they have the right opponent. Like maybe there's a certain kind of match they're more prone to do naturally, but I mean, I feel like AJ could have done other stuff, and he does stuff here where it's more of a Dragon match where it builds, has a bunch of mat stuff, has some stiff strike exchanges, and the AJ like athleticism is there, but it's more like in little dollops throughout the match. They kind of serve it up to you in little spots where he does the big spot where he is thrown towards the guardrail, he jumps over it in one big vertical leap. I think anyone who's seen a lot of AJ Styles matches has seen him do that, but it's still really cool. He does a spot where Dragon is going for a drop kick, and then AJ jumps for his own and drop kicks Dragon out of the air mid drop kick with his own drop kick. That was really cool. He at one point Dragon does a drop toe hold to AJ, and AJ takes the momentum and bumps all the way from the ring, nearly the center of the ring, to under the ropes, to the under the bottom rope to the floor. And on paper that sounds ridiculous. If you watch it, it looks perfectly great and reasonable. Like, he just, again, probably his athletic peak, looks great doing that stuff. And Dragon is just on another level, just so good, so crisp. He ends up getting busted open during this match because
hard way, yeah.
I read on live reports that it was when AJ did the moonsault into the reverse DDT. They said the first time, apparently he kind of botched it, and his leg and foot smacked Dragon right in the head, and that's what busted him open. From the camera angle I saw, it looked a little bit rough, but no more rough than a lot of his executions of that move can be at times.
Did the timing make sense there? I thought the blood came at a different time, like when they were like trading punches and forearms.
I'm not sure. I'm going from the Row Report. They might have made a weird assumption. I did notice that move did look a little bit weird, so it's possible that maybe his head nicked him there. I'm not sure.
I just remember suddenly you didn't see anything on Dragon's face. They were trading punches, and then Dragon turned around and his face was covered in blood.
Yeah, and it's a cut from right above the eye,
Yeah.
the eyebrow area. And there's a lot of things I could talk about. There's so many. This match didn't have like a big story, but it had so many cool, unique little moments from two guys that are really smart doing stuff on the fly. And there's like a kneeling chin lock where both guys are on their knees and each have the other in a chin lock simultaneously. There's a point where Dragon does like a bridging suplex move and holds for the pin. And then to sell exhaustion, even when AJ kicks out, he just holds the bridge like without moving for a few seconds and then crumples to the ground like he's just exhausted and almost out of it. And the finish is one of my favorite AJ Styles treatments of the Styles Clash ever, where Dragon's going up top. AJ's able to get him like sitting on the top. He fights back and he tries to pull him off the top rope into the Styles Clash, but Dragon's holding on. So he ends up having to like bash him into the turnbuckle and powerbomb him a couple times. And just there's this huge struggle before he finally gets to hit the Styles Clash a second time. And I just really, really liked that end. I thought it was great. And I actually am really eager to see other matches because as weird as it sounds, I thought this was great, but it felt like they could have done even more. Like it's crazy.
Yes, maybe. Although I've seen a lot of their matches. I mean, they had 3 in ROH, and I think this one's the best one by far. But maybe I'll change my mind as we keep going. Their rematch is a year from now in ROH in ROH time at a November 2003 show. So we'll see how that holds up. But I thought like what stood out to me about this match is it felt like the prototypical great ROH match. Like it was just like everything that like a top tier ROH match, like you would expect from it in terms of the wrestling, the stiffness, the crowd reactions, and I thought that it was one of the best matches of the year. I'd say it didn't quite have the intensity and emotion of the low key Dragon match or the uniqueness, and that's why I'd put that one ahead of it. But I could see this one being my second favorite ROH match of the year so far. Both guys look so great. That chain wrestling at the beginning that you were talking about, like usually the guys do the wrestling at the beginning, then they have a standoff and the crowd applauds, right? This time the crowd started going nuts and cheering while they were exchanging the holds. Like in the middle of like the back and forth amateur like chain wrestling stuff, the crowd just exploded into cheers. And then when they let go, they really exploded into cheers. So I like that. I also like that they both went for covers a lot, like trying to win. I thought that separates them from other guys. Like you could just like they just kind of get the psychology more than other wrestlers do. Like they were both trying to win a lot, which I really appreciated. All the Dragon stuff looked brutal. At one point, he does the top rope belly to back suplex that he always does, and AJ took a complete flip bump all the way over, landed on his face and stomach. Which I thought was a really great spot. Another really great spot that was early was they're on the floor. Dragon whips AJ into the guardrail like everyone does, and instead of taking out the guardrail, AJ just fully jumps over the guardrail, clears it. Dragon runs at him, and AJ just seamlessly kicks him in the face with a super kick, and Dragon does this like great knockout sell. I thought it was just awesome. So just everything about the match was awesome. At one point, Dragon's coming back. They're chopping on their knees, and then Dragon just like gets dirty for a second and just like totally like rakes AJ's face, like just grabs his face and just walks him into the corner, and then just unloads on him with forearms and kicks, and the crowd just goes nuts. I think they just love that. And then AJ hits that inverted moonsault DDT, and then the crowd gets back into him. So like the crowd just goes back and forth in who they want, and like you said, the finish was awesome. I don't know, everything was just great. At one point, AJ does like the only thing that was even slightly sloppy was this roundhouse kick that AJ gives to Dragon's head, but even that looked brutal, in a good way. It was just awesome. And you know what's funny about it? let's say if Daniel Bryan came back from, like his, if WWE cleared him, it's not going to happen. But if they did and they decided like this would be like his return match at, WrestleMania, like it's not so out of the question that this number one contenders ROH match from 2002 would be perceived as a viable WrestleMania main event, nowadays. That's pretty crazy when you think about it, isn't it?
I thought a similar thing. I thought like this would probably be if you could ask WWE fans right now. And I mean, I am a WWE fan to some extent still, but if you ask me or most WWE fans, like anyone that's employed, including, like guys like Daniel Bryan and The Undertaker, name a dream match, I imagine Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles would be pretty high on the list for a lot of fans.
Yeah.
Here it is in 2002,
Yeah, exactly. Like or a possible WrestleMania main event, and now we're watching them in their athletic primes, and it's great. It's freaking awesome.
And I think if you put this match on WrestleMania, like this same match, it wouldn't disappoint people. And this is a match they had when they were really young,
No, this
15 years ago.
This exact match would get high Match of the Year votes if it was done by these two guys in their mid-30s or late 30s.
Yeah, in front of a hot, big, giant crowd, even just in like a 17,000-seat arena for like a major pay-per-view. I think this would be remembered much differently than it is, where people who've watched it remember it's a great match, but it would be like a legendary modern WWE match probably, just because of their star power now and how good it was.
But as it stands, it's one of the top matches of 2002 for ROH, I'd say easily.
And it's a great match that it's one of the best ones that doesn't involve Low-Ki in it, because it seems like Low-Ki in the first 6 months was involved in almost every great match.
I'd say the best one that doesn't involve him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it doesn't really, like maybe like you were alluding to, it doesn't have a hook. It doesn't have a storyline. It's their first meeting. It doesn't have a lot of like emotion or tension to it. So in a way that takes a tiny bit away, but in a way it's impressive because they had like nothing to build on with this match. They had to build everything from the ground up tonight. And in fact, Dragon had already wrestled almost 10 minutes earlier in the night. So that's impressive too, where it's a crowd that's probably getting a little bit tired, that's looking at their watches and going, come on, we got to go to the CZW show. And they still get the crowd to go crazy for a lot of it. And
I thought the crowd was great for this match. So that's why part of what I was saying earlier, like that I didn't seem like they were restless.
See, I thought they were a little quiet in parts, but I thought they were there for everything that they needed to be there for. I felt like if there was a tiny bit of a lull, they weren't like making up the noise, but that's understandable. Again, where long show, they gotta go to CZW. Some of them that do, not all of them, but.
Yeah, I don't even think the CZW thing played in. I think that there was just normal ebbs and flows to the crowd reactions. I don't know. That's how it felt to me anyway.
So, great match. AJ Styles is your first ever holder of the number one contenders trophy. After the match, they do, I don't know if this is a purposeful callback, but I liked where Dragon grabs the trophy and kind of teases that he's going to destroy it like he destroyed the tag trophies. But then, of course, he hands it to AJ and shakes his hand. So a nice little tease, again, playing off a couple shows earlier. And afterwards, as Dragon goes to the back, Gabe offhandedly mentions that Dragon's real name is Bryan Danielson, and that he heard that Bryan Danielson might want to start wrestling under that name. So that's the first Ring of Honor acknowledgement, and I guess kind of the official transition to he is from here on not going to be American Dragon. He's going to be Bryan Danielson.
American Dragon Bryan Danielson.
Yeah, he's going to have the nickname still, but that's no longer going to be his working name. And camera follows Dragon to the back or Bryan Danielson, where he is immediately ambushed by the Prophecy, who is beating him down. They go into the ring and start beating down AJ Styles before Dragon and Jay Briscoe run back in and start fighting back and fight the Prophecy off. And these feuds are all going to keep continuing.
This feud must continue.
Yes. So, and the other thing to note there is Samoa Joe was not with the Prophecy because he's the hired gun. So,
we will see Samoa Joe in one moment, though.
Yes, because we get the main event, which is Shinjiro Ohtani and Masato Tanaka taking on and defeating Low Key and Steve Corino in 15 minutes 42 seconds when Ohtani pins Corino after hitting a spiral bomb, his rotating power bomb. And before I give it to you, Matt, I'll note that we do get a couple little 0-1 bits. Gabe mentions that this is being taped by Samurai TV for 0-1. We see one of their big president head honchos and the crowd getting an ovation before the match. Low Key has now switched to his more colorful blue and gold 0-1 tights. And Samoa Joe, in something that's not acknowledged by commentary, is Steve Corino and Low Key's second. He accompanies Corino to the ring. So all these little touches that are kind of differentiated from what you would normally see in a match like this in Ring of Honor. Matt, what did you think about the big main event that drew all the people? Well,
first of all, before the match, they introduced Mr. Nakamura from 0-1. That's a different Nakamura, by the way. Also, before I talk too much about the match, during the match, Gabe does a lot of plugs for upcoming ROH stuff, and at one point he mentions that at Final Battle, Conan will be coming to ROH, and this isn't going to be WCW Conan. He's coming to bring Lucha Libre back.
Oh my God! I had that written as a note. You go on.
Well, so he's like, and then Jeff Corman's like, yeah, well, Conan was a Lucha Libre artist. So we're gonna find out how Conan does with bringing his Lucha Libre art back at Final Battle. So I guess to be continued.
The timing of me rewatching this couldn't be more perfect because the Tape Machines at Tape Machines, I think, on Twitter, who writes a lot about wrestling and does a lot of GIFs, has been doing a 1996 WCW rewatch project, and he's been gifting a lot of 1996 WCW Conan back when he was not crazy Wolfpack Conan, but serious wrestler from Mexico Conan. And oh my God, is 1996 serious wrestler Conan the laziest wrestler you have ever seen, taking the most disinterested looking bumps, almost yawning while he walks into position for bumps.
Oh, you're so mean.
Go look at this guy's account and look at some of these GIFs. He is, if there was a wrestler that could take a nap while taking a German suplex, it would have been 1996 Conan.
All right.
But now that I'm done being mean,
I will look.
And I will never be on keeping it 100 now. What did you think?
Go try during the next election cycle. You could try to be on keeping it 1600. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, pod save the people. Okay, so the way this match started, first of all, Meltzer's comment was right. Ohtani got a huge pop. It wasn't quite like Kobashi level, but I feel like it was at least as big as the pop that I heard Misawa get when I saw him at ROH. Like, people really loved Ohtani being there. I don't know if it felt that way to you, but they went nuts for him.
Especially when you consider Ohtani was not as big a star as Kobashi or Misawa or even Liger and Muto. Like, he was beloved by us Death Valley Driver reading geeks and tape traders, but he wasn't a star on the level of those other guys, and he gets a huge reaction.
And then a few minutes later, they're like, "Oh, we should probably chant for Tanaka too, or else we'll be mean." So they chant for Tanaka, and then you see Ohtani being like, "Oh yeah, do that." Like, he felt a little bad for his partner. It seemed like early in the match, it felt like it was just going to be kind of an exhibition, Ohtani and Tanaka didn't really take any bumps for a while. They had some cool double team moves. Tanaka hit a crotch scoop power bomb. They pulled they did a thing where they pulled Loki's legs apart, put him in the Tree of Woe. Different stuff like that. Corino didn't really do that much. He worked over Ohtani. He worked the crowd, then he would get out pretty quickly. Loki worked the bulk of the match. Right? And Ohtani eventually does his face wash kick, and the crowd loved it. Even Gabe was like, "This is like our version of the People's Elbow." The crowd got so into it, and soon Joe's version would get over pretty big too.
Yeah.
But they do the big boot in the corner on Corino, and then miss the second one. Loki does a hanging dragon clutch on the ropes, and then Ohtani blocks the key crutcher, so Key puts on the dragon clutch. So it's just a lot of low-key doing stuff. He does a capo kick that's really cool and hits the title crush, which gets the crowd to chant for low-key. Then eventually the match keeps going, and I think the last couple minutes were really good. Where Carino finally gets in the ring, he's fighting with Tanaka for a while and Ohtani. They have some kickouts. Carino hits sort of like I guess almost like the snowplow. For a 2 count. The Ohtani hits a tornado DDT, and then Tanaka hits one. Both of them on Carino, so it's like one after the other.
Mm-hmm.
Carino comes back quickly with an exploder. I just thought like the last minute was really good. Carino did a really good job there, and they were the Japanese guys were finally taking bumps. And then eventually the match ended I'm sorry, I lost my place in my notes for a second. Okay, so Ohtani moves on a springboard kick by Loki, who hits Carino. So Loki hits Carino by mistake. Then Ohtani hits a springboard and spiral bomb almost on Carino for the 3 count. And so the crowd really loved it. The crowd was really into it. Low-key looked really good, and I thought the last couple of minutes with Carino were good. So I'd put this in the solidly good and entertaining match range. Whereas I thought at the beginning it was just going to be sort of like a pretty like quick exhibition for the main for the Japanese guys. But they eventually take some bumps, and I thought it turned into a pretty good match that the crowd was into.
I thought I would put my rating of it right where you put like a high, like just good, but satisfyingly good. I kind of would compare it to the Eddie Guerrero matches in Ring of Honor, where they're not mailing it in, but there's an extra gear. Obviously, they're not going to put they're not going to put it in, and they're not going to go to the extra mile on certain bumps.
I thought it was better than the Eddie matches, though. Like there's just.
I think it was too. I think it was a better match. I think their performances were probably around Eddie level, and I think it's easier. When you have a tag match, you can kind of be a bit more frantic, and still give like a B+ effort, and the match will be a bit better because you're only 1/4 of a match rather than
Loki was in the match, which helps.
Yeah, and it's It was really almost surreal to see Loki selling this much. Not that he hasn't sold in other matches, but he was been up to this point in Ring of Honor portrayed as he's the king. He's the ace of the promotion and the ultimate badass. And here he is taking, a beating for a significant part of this match. And he gets some offense in, but really he's there to make Ohtani and Tanaka look good. They're the centerpieces. They're the reason fans are interested in the match. And I felt like it moved at a good clip, this match, but it almost felt rushed, even though it was 15 minutes. Not in that they were putting too much into the match, but they were just kind of running around with their heads cut off almost. It almost felt like they were worried the fans would get bored.
Yeah, because they didn't really work any sort of like pathos into the match in any way. It was like they were just doing some moves.
Like, apart from maybe one submission, even when they put guys in submissions, they were broken up or they let go of them voluntarily, like almost immediately every time. It was just like, all right, what's next? What's next? What's next? Like, it felt just like they did not want to give this crowd any downtime. They wanted to keep going and going. And
might have been the right move.
Yeah, it might have been. For this late, that might have been a very smart read of the audience, for a 4-hour show. Like, let's just give them a fast-paced match.
And the crowd was really into it, considering how long the show was.
Definitely. And Carino, as you said, he wasn't in the match much, and it was interesting because Gabe kept talking about these last few shows how Carino's reinvented himself as a serious wrestler in Japan, and he wants to show off his 0-1 style. But then you get him in a big match here, and he's almost an afterthought until the last couple minutes, where he's barely in it. He's not really doing that much or showing off what he can do that much. But then he does get those final minutes, as you said, where he gets to hit some big spots and take some big moves. And obviously he takes the finish of the match. But really, a lot of this match is him standing on the apron while Low-Key's in there. So kind of interesting for a guy that's being featured as heavily as Steve. And he finally gets his chance against a couple of his big regular contemporaries in 0-1. And he doesn't do a lot for the whole bulk of the match, but Good match. I enjoyed it. It was, even though Akuro Hidaka and Dick Togo had come to Ring of Honor earlier from Japan, I would consider this the first ever kind of big Japan free agent, not free agent, but special event where it's something that Ring of Honor would repeat a ton of times with everyone from Dragon Gate guys to Muto to Liger to other Noah guys.
It's a New Japan today.
Yeah, and this was the first one of those where we brought a guy that you probably have never seen in the U.S. before. He's the main event. He's not going to be here as a regular. It's a special treat. Draws extra fans. And, well, I don't think, Ohtani and Tanaka gave as much as Kobashi or the Dragon Gate guys would do later. I feel like they did set a good standard of they didn't mail it in either. This wasn't a vacation for them.
No, definitely not. This was they had a match. They didn't have an amazing match, but they had a match.
So do you have any other thoughts about the match? That's about it for the match itself.
No, the crowd reacted at the end of it as though like they had just witnessed a classic, though, with the ROH chants and stuff. They really, really liked it, which I think is a testament to how good the show was, considering, again, how late it was, how many of them probably had somewhere else to go because of the CZW show. So I think this was that show that this was a successful night, that you had a crowd chanting ROH at the end of it.
Yeah, and it's great that, again, I thought it was almost heartwarming, the reaction Ohtani got. And like you pointed out, I thought that was really cute, where I had the same thought you did, where it's almost like they realized we're chanting a lot for Ohtani here, and then they give him a Tanaka a chant, because obviously he's not the fresh new toy. He had been in ECW a few times. So to those Philly fans, it wasn't the first time they were saying Masato Tanaka. But I thought that's a sign of that this was a successful match, where they were super excited to see Ohtani, and when they were done, that crowd felt like that was enough of what we wanted. Like, you have satisfied our excitement, you have lived up to it. And after the match, we get one final backstage segment where the Hit Squad are talking backstage to Homicide, and Homicide sharpening a fork on the wall. I don't know if that's the best way to sharpen a fork. I don't know. But
that's all you got.
Yeah. And he is still pissed about Steve Corino for turning on him, and he proceeds to go walk and find Steve Corino, who is in another room with Simply Luscious.
Just to show how pissed he was, he's just like, oh, Corino, oh, God, oh, Corino, and hitting himself in the forehead like, oh, Corino. And then he just walks away, and the Hit Squad's like, what is going on? We should probably follow him. They literally say that, like, oh, we should probably follow him.
And Homicide is doing one of those moments where Homicide barely talks in sentences, where it's just like, I can't believe that Steve Corino banned in Japan, and just goes in there, and he finds Steve with Simply Luscious, proceeds to stab Steve right in the face with the fork.
He just walks up to him, and he just, nothing going on. He just walks up to him, stabs him in the head. Just stabs him in the head.
And the Hit Squad, who are Homicide's friends, and keep in mind at this point, Homicide has been portrayed as the face, because when Steve Corino turned on him in that Glory by Honor match, Gabe freaked out, like, Steve Corino's selfish. He only cares for himself. And here Homicide is stabbing a guy in the face because he turned on him in a relatively meaningless match. And that was more miscommunication leading to anger than anything, which is really common in wrestling. Stabbing a guy in the face.
A month after the incident in question, by the way.
Yeah. And his friends, the Hit Squad, are not being like, yeah, you did the right thing, Homicide. They're like, what the hell did you do? Get out of here. Why'd you stab him?
They mention your parole, man, your parole.
Yeah, they are not happy that he stabbed Steve Corino in the face. So
I think in the nerdier version of indie wrestling in 2017, Homicide would not be the babyface for stabbing even obnoxious Steve Corino in the head while he's just sitting there talking to his Simply Luscious girlfriend.
And that's how this show ends. So obviously the Homicide feud is continuing, and it was completely in character for Homicide, but for the face in a feud, when Corino's going to be the heel in a bunch of feuds, it's another thing where it puts Steve in a sympathetic light. It's long after this relatively minor infraction has happened. He doesn't seem to have any ongoing beef with Homicide, and Homicide is still pissed, stabs him in the face with a fork. So
I just imagine Steve Corino in the hospital bed being like, Is my girlfriend simply Luscious all right? Saying that to the doctors.
They're like, besides that name, yeah, she's doing fine. And, oh my God! So yes, that was All Star Extravaganza, the very first one,
Ending with
and
somebody being stabbed in the face.
with a fork. But I think that you can make a strong case. This is the best show in Ring of Honor history, as people said at the time.
At the time,
I mean,
yes.
at to this point, not in 2017, but to this point.
Yeah.
And obviously, in terms of business, it was its biggest success ever by a minor amount. It did an extra 25-50 than they had ever done before, even though it was an afternoon show. But what I'll say is, you and I always talk about in these early shows, not always, but a lot of the time, when is Ring of Honor going to flip the switch and become more like the Ring of Honor we kind of remember of 2004 to 2006, the prime era? And what I've realized is it's never going to happen all at once. It happens in bits and pieces. It happens in 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We were kind of anticipating Unscripted would be the show where it would change, but that it only had some parts of that. But this would be a show where I felt like it did kind of feel, and I'm sure there'll be 1 step back to these 2 steps forward, but it did feel different. It did feel more like the Ring of Honor I got into when I started watching regularly in 2004. There was less of the little video segments like you mentioned before. There was less of the comedy and wackiness. There was just, they had reached a critical mass where there was a ton of interesting names up and down the card. More of the matches just had a purpose, and it was just a better product in terms of being consistent up and down.
Right. Last month I talked about, is ROH an actual good wrestling promotion at this point? And I would say there hadn't been really any other shows, except maybe Road for the Title, that felt like this is just a good promotion, a good show overall. Every show had a great match, which almost every show did, which I think, is a big testament. Very few promotions can say that. So that's good. But this is the first show where it's like, okay, this is a good wrestling promotion. There's a lot of good stuff going on. A bunch of good matches, a lot of good wrestlers doing good stuff. This is the first show where it felt that way. Like, you said, yes, it's gradual, like when they become the ROH that, got such a great reputation over the years. But this show is the biggest single show step toward it that I can think of.
Yeah, and it's the first time of this rewatch where I haven't just wanted to watch the next show because I have fun doing this podcast or because there's 1 or 2 matches or moments I remember. It's just, even though Scramble Madness is not remembered, like in general, people don't really talk about it. It doesn't have this incredible reputation. Just after the show, I was left excited for the next show in general and not for one match. I was just like, I want to see more Ring of Honor. I want to see more late 2002 Ring of Honor. And that's as good as you can do for any wrestling promotion. And it's the first time I think I can recommend a whole show, not for one match, not telling you to go to YouTube and watch the good match, not for, it's good for historical significance if you're into that, just to say, no, it's a good wrestling show. You should, if you can find it on eBay, go ahead and buy it,
Agreed.
This
is a solid show and a really good look. Like, if you want one show from 2002 to really encompass what's good about 2002 ROH, this would be the one, I would say.
Yeah, and I don't have to give it any qualifiers. Like, if it's on eBay for $10-15 and it sounds like our reviews made it sound interesting, go buy it. It's a good show, And I disappointingly have not been able to say that about a ton of 2002 Ring of Honor. So, good show. I enjoyed it. And next time, Matt, do you have any other thoughts? Actually, I should ask first about All Star Extravaganza.
I don't, but I do have one more thing I want to talk about before we hang up.
Okay.
Which is, so it was my birthday a few weeks ago, and a good friend of mine and friend of the show named Albert Ching. He's the managing editor of CBR.com. He's been on List 'em and Learn. He decided to send me some wonderful ROH themed birthday presents. And I promised him that I would talk about them on the show because they are wonderful gifts. So And if anyone else wants to send me ROH-themed gifts over the years, I will not give you my address, so you can't. But thank you for thinking of me. So first of all, he got me something I've always wanted, as somebody who doesn't play with action figures, is something that's amazing that it even exists, but it's a Kyle O'Reilly Ring of Honor action figure, which I mean, you guys can send suggestions about what I can do with this, because but as far as I'll leave it in the package as it, appreciates in value to where it one day might be worth $4. He also got me, and this was a gag gift, but little does he know that there's a lot of actually great stuff on it. A decade in the making, BJ Whitmer versus Jimmy Jacobs, which has a lot of their great matches, including the match where Jacobs gets the concussion and keeps coming to Dragon Gate Challenge, the amazing steel cage match they have at Supercard of Honor, too. So that's a legit gift that I will actually use. And the best gift of all, which I will be walking around with so everybody thinks I'm a weirdo, the Ring of Honor branded fidget spinner. Man, I've already opened it. I've already played with it. It's good stuff. So thank you, Albert. And I look forward to all of the ROH gifts that you guys would give me if you could. So you could always, in fact, if you want to tweet me and tell me what ROH gifts you would get me, if you had my address, you can tweet that at hashtag hypothetical gifts to me. And I would love to know what you would get me.
Okay. I also want to thank Albert for making that hashtag possible. Albert's a great guy. If you are interested in comic books, CBR.com is a great site for comic book news and reviews.
One day we'll have him on this show when he's willing to watch a full ROH DVD.
Albert does a great job at that site. And
also,
in fact,
catch him this week on Straight Shoot.
I was about to say, with Aubrey Sitterson's podcast where they're going to talk about wrestling.
They're going to talk about the G1 this week, and Albert is going to be on it, so check that out.
And, I think he's been on a few times because Albert is also a regular goer to PWG shows since he lives in California. So he has a lot of thoughts to give about them, and he's very funny and charming. A good word for Albert Ching is charming. Go back and listen to him and learns and listen to Albert. Charming is the first word that comes up to me with Albert Ching.
Handsome is another one. Great body.
No, he's no Orrin Hatch, but he's good looking.
He's simply luscious, if when I really think about it.
But finally, our next show will be Scrambled Madness, the second show ever Ring of Honor does outside of Philly, the second show they do in Wakefield, Massachusetts. We'll have AJ Styles versus Christopher Daniels for the #1 Contenders Trophy. We'll have Mark Briscoe's second match in Ring of Honor. Homicide and Samoa Joe having their first of maybe 772 matches they had in the company. And, of course, Bryan Danielson versus Doug Williams in a 30-minute Iron Man match. And we may or may not have a guest. I always hate to promise things. On paper we do, but until we work out the schedules, I hate to promise things. But it should be a fun show no matter what. And thank you all for listening. Sorry if there was a little bit of audio technical problems at the beginning of the show. I will work on it to be better next time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Matt, for doing the show with me, as always. And until next time.